Okay, so today we're going to make a Supersoil mix, and I call it the HR Supersoil mix. There are many Supersoils out there, mixes, and you can look them up online and how to make them. This is my own particular mix. I basically took a lot of the ideas from the other Supersoil mixes, and I've created my own Supersoil mix, and this is the Supersoil mix I've been using for quite a while now. Though I have to say I have made some changes between the first time I started using Supersoil mix and the one we're going to make today. So there are some new ingredients that we're adding to this mix. As you can see behind me, there's a whole bunch of products. We're going to go over each one of those products, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm using them, why I'm adding them to the soil. I have used this soil mix for a long time and had fantastic results with it. And there's a number of ways you can go about making your soil, but I find that this particular way of making soil is probably the best way to make soil. It always works. You're always going to get the best results from it. And it will last you for about 2 to 3 years, generally. In other words, you can reuse the old soil for about 2 to 3 years without having to really dope it up again. And you can get away with doing that for like 2 years. 3 years is kind of pushing it. 4 years, like I did last year, I let it go for another year on top of me not letting the soil sit laden in my garden for a year and all that stuff. And it really was nutrient deficient. So I really stretched it out, and I paid the price for it. So if you do it every 2 years, you're generally pretty good. And your doses, you can probably cut your doses down on certain things in general, and you may not need to add as much of that particular element. And you'll learn about those elements as you make the soil. You'll see which ones. I'll talk about which ones you can put a little bit less of in your following year. You're just basically re-energizing that soil. You're not going to put as much certain things, but other things you can. So let's go over some of the products. We'll go over them in detail, like I said, one by one. I'll explain them to you. Then we'll basically, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. I used to have a swimming pool, like a baby's pool for swimming, and I would mix my soil in that with a hoe. Fortunately, I don't have the baby's pool no more. So now I have to do it either on a tarp or I have to do it in a wheelbarrow, and I don't think I'm going to fit it in my wheelbarrow. So let's get into the products that we got, and then we'll start mixing the soil and go from there. I've also prepared a little booklet for you to download with all the ingredients. I've included some Amazon links to where I bought the products and other links that I would probably recommend using. It's got all the details in there, and I have also included some other stuff in there that you might find interesting as far as gardening in pots and other things that you're probably going to need if you're going to get into organic gardening. So there's a bunch of stuff in the literature in there that you can really look over. So you can download that from my website. I'm not sure how to put it into PDF form, so it comes as a download button and then download it that way. So you'll just have to basically copy and paste the page from there, unless somebody wants to tell me how I can set up a download button for that page and you can just download it. It's a free article. You don't need to buy anything. You just go there and look for my seed mix, soil HR Supersoil mix. You can find that on the homepage somewhere. If you have done something similar to this in the past, I would definitely appreciate a comment telling me your experience using either Supersoils or how you even make your own soil. So that's something that I would really be interested in hearing from my viewers. Please share that so others can read it as well. All right, so let's get into the products one by one. Okay, so as you can see, I got a number of products lined up on the table that we're going to go over each one of these products, and the other stuff I'll just have to bring the camera over to that area when we're ready to review or talk about those products that I'm using there. But basically these are all the smaller items I can fit on here, plus I got the perlite over there, and I got some worm castings and stuff there. So I can only fit so much on this table, and then, you know, I'll bring you over to where the soil and stuff is, and we can go over that. But here's the booklet. I basically printed up this quick booklet for you, so you have something to work with. And again, you can download this on my website at HRSeeds.com, and you'll also see a link in the description down below where you can click on that link, and it'll bring you right over to this. And I don't know if I'm going to set up as a PDF, or you're just going to have to basically copy and paste it or figure out how to print it on your own, unless somebody knows how to actually set that up so it's in the PDF print, so you could just hit download or something like that. I'm not really sure how to set that up. I'm not a a webmaster that knows how to do all that stuff. So if you know how to do that, feel free to comment below and just let me know how to do it and explain that to me. Anyway, we're going to go over this really quickly, and then we'll look at each one of these products. HRSeeds Supersoil Mix for flower pots and raised garden beds. Now, you can use this for your regular garden if you decide to, but this is mostly geared for pots and raised beds, because they're confined areas and they really need the maximum amount of attention, whereas in a garden, generally, there's a lot of nature type things that take place in your garden that are really out of your control. And if it rains a lot or this happens or that happens, you're going to really wash those nutrients out. Insects get in there, they eat the nutrients, and so it's very unpredictable once it's in your garden. But in a raised bed or inside of your flower pots, they're generally confined, and those results are very predictable. Whereas in your garden, it's a little less predictable, but it's not going to hurt your garden if you spent the kind of money you're going to spend here on these products and everything and fill up your garden with that soil. You can very well do that if you'd like to, but it's not necessary in your garden. All you need is really good soil and you're good to go. But if you're going to do pots, and you're going to do wicking beds, or you're going to do raised beds or garden troughs or anything like that, you're going to want to use this soil mixture for that. This is going to give you the optimum conditions for your plant's roots. Okay, so the foundation is going to consist of 16 cubic feet, which is 8 bags of 2 cubic feet. So you need 8 bags of soil that equal 2 cubic feet. And the foundation itself is going to consist of 50% topsoil, 40% peat moss, and 10% perlite. And to that base, that foundation, we're going to add 15% sand to that total mix, about 15%. You really got to do that by eye when you add the sand. It's not going to hurt your soil if you add too much sand, but you really want to do it by eye, because we're just adding enough sand to it to keep the soil from become clumpy. You want to be able to squeeze that soil, and when you open your hand, it's all powdered, not powdered, but it breaks apart in your hand. You don't want it to squeeze it into a clump and it stays like a clump. That's not good, because down the road, when the soil sits in your pots and you're watering it every day, the soil is going to start breaking down from the microbes and everything, and that soil is going to really becoming compacted or impacted, and the drainage is going to really drop off, and it's going to start getting waterlogged on the inside of that bowl. On the inside of it, the very center part is going to become very wet and soggy. It's almost as if it's creating its own little water table in there. We don't want that. We want consistent moisture throughout the pot. So by adding the sand to it, that really helps keep that consistency of moisture throughout the pot. We'll get into sand a little bit more. I'm going to go down along here. It's in there somewhere. So there's just some other stuff I put in here. 1 cubic yard equals 27 cubic feet. Keep these dimensions in mind. I'll try to zoom you up on that. Keep these dimensions in mind, so as you're going to the store and you're buying your soils, and they like to label, one is labeled cubic feet, one is labeled in cubic liters, one is labeled in pounds, one is labeled in gallons, there's all these different things, and they're very confusing. I gave you some measurements here, so when you're buying your soil, remember, you want to equal 16 cubic feet in the end, and you're generally going to want to follow these guidelines to help you get to 16 cubic feet. If you get one that's like an odd number, 2.1 cubic feet, don't worry about it. That little extra ain't going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt the mix at all. This is a general guideline to get you in that ballpark for a good super soil mix. Topsoil, 8 bags. Total soil volume after it's fully mixed will equal about 1.7 to 2 cubic yards of potting soil. So that's a lot of soil that we're going to end up with when we're finally complete with this. You're going to end up with about 1.7 to 2 cubic yards, give and take, depending on what other ingredients. If you got some extra soil that you're throwing in there, you're building that soil up. All right, so you may end up with more. That's a lot of soil. I can fill a lot of pots with 2 cubic yards. I could probably almost do all my wicking beds too. Also, to avoid soils that contain additives and biosolids. And one of the soils I had to pick out was Miracle Grow, because they were sold out of basically all the other soils, and the other soils they had were all 1.5 cubic foot bags, and I didn't want to get the 1.5 cubic foot bags. It was organic, and the soil conditions that were in the 1.5 cubic foot were very grainy. And that's okay, that's fine. It's just, if I'm going to buy soil, I want it to be already broken down and processed. I don't want to buy something that's like maybe 30% mulch in there. So I want soil. I need soil. I can buy mulch and add it to that soil. I want soil and not mulch. So I bought the soil over here, which is a Miracle-Gro. I'm going to show you in 1 second. And I decided to go with that one. But what I'm trying to get at is you want to stay away from, generally you want to stay away from Miracle-Gro soils, because if I understand correctly, they may be one of the people that add biosolids to the soil. I don't know that. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. But I'd be a little leery of using Miracle-Gro soil, even though I'm using it in this video. I may or may not have proof to that claim, so there may not be biosolids in that soil. I opened a bag of that soil already and smelled it with my hand, and it smelled good. If you have biosolids that are in that soil, it's going to have a stink to it, almost like it's like a fuel oil smell to it. It has a certain kind of a smell. I can't even describe it to you. You'll know that it's not rich garden soil. If you put that soil to your nose and you smell it, and it smells like there's something fuming off of it, you don't want to use that soil, because you don't know what that is that's in the soil. So I bought this soil, I smelled it, it smelled good, and it also says, it doesn't say anything about adding fertilizers to the Miracle-Gro soils. You'll see on a lot of their bags, a lot of the soils will say with fertilizer added, plus fertilizer, or with fertilizer added. You don't want to use that because we're making our own fertilizer, and we don't want that to interfere with what we're trying to achieve as far as the fertilizer goes. So you want to avoid, most importantly, is the soils that contain added fertilizers, because that's really going to mess up our mix. What we're mixing up here, you're never going to need to add fertilizer, other than like you might want to do a seaweed, a compost tea. You want to add some other fertilizer to add to your watering container once a week or once a month or whatever. You could do it that way, but don't buy it with the added time relief fertilizer in our particular case, because we're going to be making our own soil. So you want to avoid that, all right? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. I also included some links down here for some of the soils that I recommend. Black Gold is one of the top choices. Also, Fox Farm is also another good soil I recommend, so you can order that from Amazon if you want to. That's why I included those links. But let's go take a look at the garden soil that I bought from Lowe's today, and I'm going to tell you how much I basically paid for all this. So let's take a walk over there. Okay, so here's the garden soil I chose to use, and unfortunately I don't have a bag that's busted open right now, and I'm not actually going to be mixing this today because it's almost the end of the day and I have other things I got to do, but you will see me mix it in this video later on in the video. So I'm not going to be able to open it right now, and tomorrow we're supposed to get an inch of rain, and I don't want a hole in this bag to open it, though I am really dying to open it for you just to show you the consistency of this soil. You will see this soil was actually very beautiful soil. But this was the one that I used. It's just garden soil, all-purpose for in-ground use, but we're using it for pots because, see, when they tell you in-ground use, it kind of scares you away from using it in pots, because you're like, oh, well, that's no good for pots. But when you're mixing up your own soil with peat moss and perlite and everything, don't worry about it. This is what you want. If you look at the consistency of the soil, it's like a very fine ground black coffee grinds. That's what it looks like. There's no particles in it other than it's all soil. There's nothing else in it. It's solid soil. It says feeds up to 3 months, but it doesn't say that they added fertilizers. That's what I looked for. Now, did they actually add it in there? I don't know. But you don't see those little round beads in there, per se. Try to turn you up. Okay. So, on the back, I'm looking for an ORMI listing, and I do not see ORMI. So this isn't ORMI certified, but they also have their own certification. So this is actually a pretty good soil, to be honest with you. I looked at it pretty good. I mean, there's not much about it that I really didn't like, except everybody hates Miracle-Gro because they're like a big commercial company and they probably support Monsanto and all. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and if this is all that you can get, then you get this. This was the best price. I think I paid $7 a bag for 2 cubic feet. I think that was a good deal compared to all the other soils they had. They just didn't meet our criteria of soil. But I'm just kind of letting you read the back of it. If you have no other choice, I recommend buying this one. This one's a pretty good one. Or just order the soil off of Amazon. They'll deliver it right to your house. No matter how big of an order you order, that doesn't matter. They'll deliver it right to you. See, there's nothing in here because they're telling you to buy these other ingredients to add as fertilizer. It's for in-ground use, not for containers. See how they scare you? They're telling you, not for containers, don't use this, it won't work in your containers. But the fact is all you have to do, even if you didn't do all the other ingredients, all you have to do is add peat moss to this, and it's perfectly fine for pots. The reason why they don't tell you to add this to containers is because if you just put this soil by itself in containers, in your pots, I mean, within about a month, that soil will be fully compacted and wet, and it won't drain anymore. So that's why they're telling you not to add it to your flower pots, okay? Just so keep that in mind. That's why they're scaring you away, because it's not ready for pots. If you look at soils in the store, when you go to look at your soils, this one is basically, like I said, there's nothing in it. It's just like brown soil. It's like black soil. There's no particles in it at all. It's completely composted down to its lowest form. So what I'm trying to say is when you go and you look at potting soils, you'll see there's a lot of organic matter in it. There's a lot of pieces of broken branches, and that's because they want good drainage, and it's also good for slow release nitrogen later on in the season. It feeds the plants. So that's why they're scaring you away. But we're mixing our own soil, so don't let that scare you. There's no additives in this. The only thing that this is considered topsoil. I don't know if it's organic topsoil. I'm just kind of reading over here. It says apply mulch, spread 2 to 3 inches, blah, 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 blah. You can read all this on your own if you want. Just pause the video and you can read this on your own. But I like the color of it. It was very black soil. It was very, very black. All right, and when I open it, you'll see what the soil looks like later on in the video. We'll open it. We'll take a real good look at that. It looked really good to me. There's no additives in it. I didn't see any of those little round beads in it or any of that stuff. So there's nothing added. It's just pure soil. That's all it is. It's basically very, very, very carbon rich, and that's what we want for our foundation. And we're going to be talking about this later on. This is a very, very important additive to make this soil. So you have to really look into this. We're going to really go over the mulch in details, how I apply that to my soil, how I add it to it to bring the natural fulvic acid and humic acid up inside the soil. So we're going to be getting into that a little bit later. But I just wanted to show you the soil that I'm using for this mix to make this. Now, I do have this soil here, which is the organic version of... It's the organic version of Miracle Grow that they have. I believe it does meet RMI, as you can see there. So it is organic. There's definitely no biosolids in here. I doubt there's biosolids in that because I smelled it. I'm willing to taste it. I'll do a taste test on that soil. I'll tell you if it has biosolids in it. It feels like good soil, but I bought this soil because I'm getting ready to make my seed mix. So this is what I'm going to use for my seeds, specifically for starting my seeds. I got to do that very soon. But this soil right here is what I bought that for. But I also bought it because I want to show you some of the difference between this soil and that soil, and we'll look at that, okay? So let's take a walk back over to the bench, and we'll go over the next item. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about are the facts. And the facts that I included in here are just some basic facts about soil, pH, and things like that. So let's just make sure we understand this, and so you understand what you're getting into when you're ready to actually start making the soil. And so you'll understand why we're doing what we're doing. All right. So the facts is soil pH. Soil pH is generally best for gardening between 6.4 and 7.2. Anything outside of generally that pH range starts to become a very big problem for uptake for the plant. It can't uptake the micronutrients into the plant, and so you're going to start to have problems anywhere outside of that range. The optimal condition is about 6.7. You want to be somewhere 6.5, 6.7, somewhere in that range. You want to look for it to being optimal. If you're somewhere between 6.4 and 7.2, you're also good too. And I included some pH ranges for the different vegetables like tomatoes. They like it between 5.5 and 7.5, all right? Let me see if we can get you down here. They like it between 5.5 and 7.5. Peppers like it between 5.5 and 7.0. Spinach likes it between 6.0 and 7.5. Peas like it between 6.0 and 7.5. Lettuce likes it between 6.0 and 7.0. And corn likes it between 5.5 and 7.5. All right? So that's just to give you an idea. I'm not going to list every single vegetable, but just to give you an idea on some of the common garden vegetables that we grow and the pH ranges for them. You can see most of them fall right within that range. I mean, some of them like it really lower pH, but they never really go too much over 7. You know, 7.5 is already pushing it. But so if you're 6.4, 6.7, you're beautiful with that. All right, and I'll show you down the road how we test our pH if need be as we make the soil. It's kind of hard to test pH in soil because it's very inaccurate. You kind of have to look at the health of the plant really to know how the pH is doing in your soil, because you test with these testers and they don't really work 100%. They give you an idea where you might be, but when you're dealing with pH, even 1 or 2 numbers in either direction could be a very big change. So you got to be real careful with the testers, okay? That's why you don't never really see me use testers. I've learned to read the pH and soil conditions based on my plant's health. Some of the other facts, we talk about the macros. Macronutrients is your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, or also known as potash. Potash is what you would get your ashes when you burn wood, for example. All those white ashes you're left over with. We're not talking about biochar. We're talking about the ashes, the white ashes that are left. That is called potash. That's your NPK with your macronutrients. Then you got secondary macronutrients, which would be considered your calcium and magnesium and your sulfur. So these are your secondary macros. They're very important for your garden. When you get blossom end rot on your fruits and vegetables, you're probably having a problem with your secondary macros. You got to understand these three. The reason why they're separated from the NPK is the secondary macronutrients, they work together. So if you're just dumping a ton of calcium in your soil to deal with your blossom end rot, you have a magnesium and sulfur issue as well. You need to combine all three of those to give it a balance, because the plant cannot utilize the calcium by itself without these other secondary macros in there. Without those, you're not doing it any good. You'll see a lot of people say, oh, just add Tums and that'll solve the problem. It gives it a slight cure. You'll notice that the blossom end rot will continue. And some plants and some vegetables are more prone to blossom end rot than others. And the reason why is because you need that balance of your calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. It's very important. And basically the way we do that is through Epsom salt, which is magnesium sulfate, which is the magnesium and the sulfur, and then the calcium, of course, we're adding to the garden through lime. So you're getting all three of those, and that's a very important thing that you keep that in mind, all right? That's different from your primary macronutrients. Then you got the gaseous macronutrients, which is basically carbon or CO2, your hydrogen, and your oxygen, which it gets from the air and from the water. It actually does get these elements from the air and water, which is not something you generally have to worry about. But we can do some things with the CO2 to give the plant some boost during the mid-season. I'll talk about that. I'll show you how I do that in the future for an extra boost. We'll go over that in details another time. But yes, those are also considered gaseous macronutrients. They're usually not anything to worry about, but sometimes low carbon dioxide conditions can cause unforeseen problems inside your greenhouse if it's not getting enough ventilation. So it's very important you understand these things here. Then, of course, we have the micronutrients, which is your boron, chlorine, your copper, your iron, your manganese, your molybdenum, your zinc, nickel. They are essential for the plant's health. You need these micronutrients in order for your plant to be healthy. If it lacks any one of these micronutrients, your plant is simply not going to be healthy. So understand that these micros are just as important as the macros, okay? There's a lot more other micronutrients, but they call those tertiary micronutrients or submicronutrients. And those are things like cobalt and chromium and iodine and lithium and selenium, sodium, silicon, etc. Now those are also micronutrients, but they're not necessary for the plant to grow and develop, though they do benefit the plant. So for example, over here for, what do we got here? Iodine, for example, it's not needed for the plant's development or cell structure necessarily. There's not really too much science on it, but it's needed for our health. If you're growing your plants in soil that lacks iodine in the soil, well, guess what? Your plant doesn't need it. It's going to grow. It's going to look healthy. But guess what? You're going to become iodine deficient because you don't have iodine in your soil. In some senses, it's needed in the soil for your health. It's not necessary for the plant, but it's needed for your health. Okay, that's just one example. All right, that's why I included that here. Another example is sodium is not necessarily needed for the plant's health, but if you add the sodium to the soil, the Na, now be careful with the sodium. We're going to get into that in a little bit down the road. But if you add a little bit of that sodium to the soil, it benefits the plant. So it's not necessarily required. It's not a prerequisite for the plant to survive, but it benefits the plant above and beyond these other basic micronutrients. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is very, very important information that I'm showing you. Okay, you need to understand these foundations. This works with all plants, trees, aquatic plants. If you're somebody like me who has a planted aquarium and you need to know about plants in your planted aquarium, you need to understand these fundamentals in order for you to be able to grow plants in an aquarium successfully. There's also a little chart I included here, and it shows you the pH ranges and which is the optimal range for pH right here for each one of the micronutrients to absorb. So you can see if your pH is all the way down by 4.5, it's not really absorbing anything very well except for iron. That's the only thing that it's going to uptake very well. All the other things are going to show signs of deficiency because your pH is too low. Okay, keep that in mind. This is very, very important. You can have all the nutrients in the world in your soil, and if your pH is out, you're going to show signs of deficiency. So you got to be on top of your pH. That's why when we make this mix, it's made very carefully, okay? A lot of thought, a lot of measurements been put into this in order to make the soil so it's balanced right out the gate. We're not worried about too high, too low pH. We're coming right in where we want. I am shooting for that 6.7 right out the gate, and we're going to see if that works. But if I need to, I start seeing a little problems, I can always test the soil. And if it looks like I got to raise pH, there's ways I can raise the pH. But you can see at the low end and at the high end, it's the same situation. So you got the problem almost across the board in either way. But if you're somewhere between that 6.5 and 7, if you're in that range right there, boom, you're golden on all of them. It's going to be able to uptake all those micronutrients, okay? So keep that in mind. This part of the talk is very important so you understand how your plants are going to uptake these nutrients. And you need to know this because you're going to be spending, if you're doing it the way I'm doing it, you're going to be spending $500 to $600 on materials that you want to make sure you're going to get the maximum usage out of what you're doing. You don't want it to be a failure because you didn't listen to what I'm saying in this video. You need to listen very carefully what I'm saying. That's why I provided you on my website with this booklet as well as watching the video and me talking about it. Keep that in mind. That's a very important aspect. All right, so let's just move through this now. All right, this was very important that I took time to cover this. That was like the most important thing of everything. The rest of the stuff is just basic facts. Plants transpire during the day and they respirate at night. Okay, you need to understand that because plants breathe just like we do. During the daytime, they breathe out oxygen. They exhale oxygen, so to speak. And at nighttime, they breathe in oxygen and they exhale carbon dioxide. So it flips around at nighttime. So when there's no photosynthesis taking place, it reverses the action. You need to know that about your plants. It's a very basic fundamental. You need to understand that and you need to know it. It's printed here. You can look it up online and download it and read it later. Rainwater only. I put rainwater only because generally you want to just water your plants with rainwater if at all possible. Can you use RO water to water your plants? I mean, if you're doing as many plants as I'm doing, using any kind of filtrated water system is absolutely unsustainable. So you need to use something that's sustainable. You're either going to use city water or you're going to use rainwater. I would suggest highly using rainwater to water your plants. And if you do everything the way I'm showing you in this video about the soil, your soils are generally going to maintain the moisture very consistently. So you're not going to want to water your pots So the water is flooding out of the pot, bottom of the pot, washing all the nutrients out that you just put in your soil. You don't want to wash all those nutrients out of your soil, and now it's becoming nutrient deficient and the pot is drying out at the same time. You want to add enough water to the soil to hydrate it, and that's it. You're done. You don't need to add too much more than that. Exactly how much water you need to do to your pot, it's different for everybody. In my case, it could be 2 cups of water, maybe 3 cups of water that I use. A light sprinkling, I do that maybe twice a day. My watering conditions are going to be different from yours. But if you use the watering system that I'm explaining to use, and you minimize your watering to the plant, you're not overwatering the plant, and you're not allowing the root system to dry out. We're going to avoid drying the root system out, and at the same time, you're allowing the soil to dry out and the roots to get some oxygen. So we don't want that plant soggy all day long. You can't do that. You're going to cause problems in the soil. I've done it myself. I'm a victim of that same thing. What I've learned to do is just small waterings throughout the day is the most beneficial for your pots and your raised beds. Raised bed, you could get away with using an irrigation system set up on a timer if you calculate how much water it's going to release and everything. That's a totally different system. What we're doing for is pots is we're basically going to be hand watering each pot with a watering thing. When you're doing 500 pots, it's a lot, but it's not that much because 1 gallon of water will spread out very easily among all your plants. Okay, so keep that in mind. And the reason why I'm saying use the rainwater is, I'll read this to you. It says, avoid using city water and use rainwater or distilled water only. Most city water has a high pH of around 8.0 and contains things like liquefied chlorine, fluorosilicic acid, also known as fluoride, aluminum sulfate, calcium hydroxide, sodium silicosafluoride, I don't even know how to pronounce this stuff, trihalomethanes, and hormones, nitrates, chloramines, ammonia, phosphates. This is a standard water system that has these ingredients in your water. Okay, that's why I bought my water distiller. I did a video about a water distiller. That's why I bought my water distiller, because of these things that are in your water. You don't want this stuff in your soil. It's going to kill off the biology in your soil. So basically what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to water it with regular distilled water, because distilled water is generally a little lower than 7. Could be like 6.7, 6.9, 6.5, and it could be 7. You know, it's supposed to be distilled, pure distilled water is supposed to be 7. So it might be a little low to being 7, which is what you want. If you start adding 8.0 or higher pH water to your soil, it's not only going to cause your soil to become hard in the sense where you're going to start seeing white calcium deposits build up on the top of the soil. Not only is it going to cause that kind of a problem, those minerals that are coming into your soil are inorganic minerals, and you really don't even want to add that stuff to it because it's also contaminated. These minerals are coming in as a positively charged particle, and you don't want that in your soil. What we're adding here are basically going to be negatively charged particles. They're going to break down easy. The microbes are going to break them down. They're going to become bioavailable very quickly to your plants. That 8.0 pH, that right there is going to start throwing your pH out of your soil. Every time you water your soil with 8.0 pH, and we're setting our soil up to be, say, I don't know, 6.5, 6.7, right? Every time you water with 8.0, what happens? I'm going to tell you what happens. You know what happens? The soil pH goes up, it gets a spike, and then it wants to drop back down. So now you're spiking your pH. Every time you water your soil, your pH is going up, and then it's going back down. Then it's going up, and then it's going back down. And every time you do that, you're causing an undue stress on your plants that's completely unnecessary. The way you deal with that is by using rainwater. You do not want your soil pH to go up and down and up and down. You don't want that. You want to keep it within a small little sine wave. Like, you want little ups, little downs, not spikes and up and spikes down. You don't want that. That's not what you want in your soil. That's going to cause undue stress. Your plants are not going to do as good. By using rainwater, you're not going to create that situation. It's generally neutral in pH. So you're not bringing pH up and then down. The pH that's in city water is a hard type of a pH. It has a buffering in it effect to it. And it's eventually going to cause your soil to start rising in pH and start causing deficiencies, as we just talked about in this chart. So we want to avoid that by using distilled water or rainwater. Rainwater is distilled water. It's basically the same thing. Yeah, it picks up some particles in the air, but in general, it doesn't have calcium, magnesium, and all that other stuff. We added all the calcium and magnesium we want to it. We don't need more. That's going to start throwing the soil balance out. That's not how nature works. That's not how it's going to work in your pots. My philosophy was, if nature rains and waters my plants and my plants do healthy in the yard, in the ground, and that's the way it works, that's the way it's going to work in your pots. So rainwater is absolutely superior to any other form of watering. If you can't get rainwater or use rainwater, and you're not going to distill your own water per se to water your pots in your garden, filter it the best you can. That's the only thing I can tell you. You're not going to be able to get the best results by using anything other than either rainwater or distilled water. Those are the only things I can recommend. You use anything else, I cannot guarantee the results of what's going to happen down the road, because now you're playing a little chemistry game here, because we got all these other products right here that we're adding, and now you're creating a chemical. I'm not a chemist, so I don't know what's going to happen when you start adding fluorosilicic acid to the soil, or you start adding calcium hydroxide to the soil. I don't know what's going to happen to your soil down the road. You say, oh, it's just once or twice, that's not going to do anything. Yeah, probably right, but you're watering it twice a day. In the heat of the summer, 2, 3, sometimes 3 times a day. In about a month, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, I don't know what else to say. You really want to start catching rainwater. Even if you take 5-gallon buckets during your rainy season, you put out like 10 5-gallon buckets and you catch as much rain out of them buckets as you can. Just catch that water and save it. And remember, if you use the system I'm using, and I show you how I set my plants up, you're not going to worry about major evaporation. I'm going to show you how to reduce all of this. Any water that starts coming out of your pots and everything is going to come out through transpiration. They're going to transpire, all right, and they're going to respirate. And that's where the moisture is going to lift all these nutrients up through the stem of the plant, all right? So very important. That's another very important thing I wanted to talk to you about. All right, so also something too important that I wanted to talk about too is the humidity. Generally, humidity, when you have high humidity and high heat, they call that a heat index, and when your heat index is very high in your area, it's going to start to suffocate your plants from either transpiring or respirating. That's why at nighttime, when the temperatures stay 80 and above at nighttime and humidity's kind of high, you can kill all your garden plants by that one combination. That's why it's very hard to grow vegetables in Florida. So keep that in mind, that humidity is a very important factor. If it looks like your plants are starting to get some suffering, check all the facts. Check to make sure that it's not because of your humidity and high heat. High heat and humidity are 2 of the worst things, combinations you can have. It's not in your control to control the humidity, just letting you know that these might be some environmental factors you're going to have to deal with. All right, so that's why I brought that up. Let's go to page 3. I'm not going to do this through the whole thing, but we're just going to go over these first parts because it is important. And if you're going to spend this kind of money on the soil, yeah, you're going to want to listen to what I'm saying. If you decide to make the soil. Of course, there's temperature. The optimal air temperature for your plants is 65 to 85. Those are your optimal air temperatures. Keep that in mind. Anything higher than that, we're talking about the plant beginning to suffer transpiration. Anything lower than that, it starts to go into a dormancy state, or you force it into a flowering stage because now it thinks that winter is coming. And so you don't want that balance. Its optimal growing range and for flower and bloom is 65 to 85. And also your soil temperatures, you want very similar. You want it between 65 and 90. And the reason why you want to keep that in mind about your soil is you're growing in pots now. Keep that in mind. If you stick your pots in the sun and the sun is beaming down in your pots and you're cooking that pot to like 90 or 100 degrees, that pot can get too hot. It can actually cause problems in your plant or even damage them. So keep that in mind. That's the reason why I put that in there. All right, so you want to make sure that you're keeping the temperatures in mind as you watch your plants grow. If it gets too hot, you can water them down or something, or put shade cloth over them so they're not getting cooked. I just included a couple charts here for you. You can look at those when you download this or you look at it online. There's some charts here. There's also some functions of micronutrients. These are all important little facts about micronutrients. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the peat moss, and I'll show you the peat moss I'm using for this mix, and we'll talk a little bit about peat moss. And keep in mind that for this mix, which is going to be for the 8 cubic bag foundation soil mix, for that part of it, we're going to be using about 2 bales or 3 cubic feet of peat moss for the whole mix. So you want to consume that whole 2 bales within the whole mix. All right, so we're just giving you a guideline here on how much to add to it and everything. So let me take you over to the peat moss. I'll show you the one I'm using, and we'll go from there. Okay, so this is the peat moss I'm using. I bought it from Lowe's. I believe it's about $11 a bale for this, and it is ORMI listed. All right, I like to buy all RMI listed products if I can. And this is the peat moss I use. You can buy your peat moss basically at Walmart. I've seen them. If you calculate the cubic feet and how much they're charging you, if you do that calculation, you'll find that the cubic footage bags, the 2 cubic foot ones at Walmart, are actually cheaper. It's 2 cubic feet, but the price for the 2 cubic feet, if you break that down into how much each cubic foot is, you'll find out that those are cheaper. So go and buy those if you get a chance. I just needed to pick these up. I was in there in one shot, and I normally use this brand anyway. Here's a look at the back. All right, just give you a quick view. If you can't read it, pause the video. I love this peat moss. I've been using this stuff for decades. I've been using peat moss for literally decades. All right, so let's go over why we use peat moss and stuff like that. Okay, so the reason why we use peat moss, I'll just read this really quick. I took this as a quote from somewhere online. I don't remember the resource I got it from. I just grabbed a quote that I felt would be good for this presentation, just so you can read what other people had said about it. It has a remarkable ability to manage water efficiently and holds on to the nutrients that would otherwise leach out of the soil. So that's very important. We're adding all these nutrients to the soil. We don't want them to leach out from overwatering or accidentally overwatering, or it rained on them or something. You want those nutrients to stay in the soil. So that's one of the reasons why I add it. It says, while performing these amazing tasks, it also improves the texture and consistency of the soil. pH range is between 4.4 and 4.5. That changes, that 4.4, 5.5, that changes immediately, quickly after the soil starts to turn black to a carbon. When you first add peat moss to your soil, it's very brown in color. After about a week, after it's been wet and you're watering it and it's been around a little bit, it's going to turn black right away. It turns over to carbon very quickly. When it does that, that pH range is going to bump all the way up to probably 6.2, 6.5. So it's really going to be kind of going up in pH. So it's not going to be as acidic as a lot of people are afraid. They're like, oh, don't use because it's very acidic. No, that's not actually not true. It actually goes up in pH very quickly. It loses that acidic effect. It doesn't stay that way. But we want it to kind of stay low because we're adding calcium to our soil, so we don't want that. We want a nice balance. You know what I'm saying? And the peat moss, while it's in that brown stage, is very good for the soil for the first month or two. And as the season goes on, it's going to turn black and become basically pH neutral. And we don't really want that. We want that something to hold our pH down a little bit. And we'll build the pH up artificially using rock dust and calcium. And so I included some links to it below here. You can check these products out online if you want. Also, to the square foot gardening method, I think it's called the Mel's Mix. The Mel's Mix tells you to use 1/3 compost or soil, 1/3 peat moss, and 1/3 perlite. And that's generally what we're doing here. We're basically using that Mel's Mix is generally what we're doing. So it's not outside of that ramification. It's pretty much like a Mel's Mix. So it's the foundation is kind of based on that, though my mixture has been modified a little bit because we're adding so many other ingredients. Let's talk about perlite. That's the next thing I want to show you and we'll talk about, and I'll show you the bag in a minute. So this mix consists of 32 cups for 16 cubic feet of soil. You can substitute with vermiculite if you want. If you can't get perlite and all you can get is huge bags of vermiculite, get that. That's fine. I like to use perlite. and it lightens the soil up nicely. It makes it nice and light and fluffy. You got to add perlite to the point where you're doing it kind of by eye. So this 16 cups is kind of just a guesstimate, so to speak, because I don't like to add too much perlite where it looks almost all white. I don't want that. I want a good mix where there's enough perlite in it, but not too much. I just want to break up the soil and lighten it up a little bit. We don't want to necessarily... Mel's mix is basically 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We're not using 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 when it comes to the perlite. And over here, perlite's only 10%. All right, that's why I'm not exactly a Mel's mix, but it is kind of based on that though, but it's not exactly the same thing. We don't want too much perlite. You want enough in there to lighten up that soil. The idea of the perlite is to lighten it up and break up the soil. That's the idea. We want to aerate that soil. We want oxygen in the soil. You don't want to pack soil down. You want looseness and loominess in the soil. So the perlite adds to that. Between the perlite and the sand, we're going to have a really good loomy soil that holds moisture and yet drains very well. That is the key to what we're trying to achieve here. It is used as an additive to aerate soil and to modify the soil substructure. All right, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but that's basically what we want the perlite for. And let me just show you that perlite really quickly. So there's horticultural perlite. This is the bag, and this is a 4 cubic feet bag. Now, I don't think I'm going to use that entire bag with this mix. It was just the cheapest way for me to get perlite was to order this bag and to get the amount of perlite that I would have needed. If I were to buy those little bags, it would have cost me almost the same thing as buying like 10 of those little bags, and I'm still going to have some left over for next year. So, or I can use it for hydroponics. But that's the brand of perlite I used, and I've been using this perlite now for, oh man, I don't know, at least 5-6 years. I've been using this since my first mix, whatever that was, 7 years. So that's the brand I use. I buy that lasts me 1 or 2 mixes, and then I buy another one. And it's fairly cheap. It's like $35 or something. So it's well worth the money. Now this, you can get fine perlite or the quartz. This is the quartz perlite, which is much bigger granules. And the reason why I get that is because that is the only one that's available at that price. And if you really want fine perlite, to be honest with you, just take a hammer, lay it out on the table, and just break it up with a hammer a little. Don't smash it, just tap it. It just breaks up into little pieces. It breaks up like nothing. Easier than breaking glass. It's just, you can almost break it up in your hands. If I stuck my hand in there and start crunching it, it's going to break up. I don't necessarily want that. I like the big chunks like that, personally. That's what I used, and that's the stuff I like. Okay, the next thing we're going to add the sand to the soil. And basically 2 to 4 bags of sand per this particular mixture we're making. So it's give and take. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you really got to add the sand as you go, and you do a squeeze test, you know, like that. Where are we here? You do a squeeze test on the soil, and if it stays like a clump when you open your hand, you want to add a little more sand to it. All right, so that's basically what we're going by. So there's no real set number. It always kind of changes as you go along. You may need to add more sand, you add a little more. It's not going to hurt the soil if you add a little extra sand. If I'm telling you 2 cups of sand for this much mixture and you added 3 cups, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to hurt nothing. It doesn't add anything to the soil. It doesn't take away anything to the soil. It just simply allows the soil to remain loose, and it keeps it from compacting or impacting, and it allows good drainage. Again, these are the most important things we're looking for here. And then you can read the question and answers about, I don't know, perch water tables in your garden and soil and stuff like that. I included that. There's also some links. Let me show you the product and the type of sand that I recommend using. So that's the sand that I recommend right there. You want to use play sand. I don't recommend builder sand because builder sand, it's not rinsed or anything in general. I believe this is rinsed, but you can rinse it again. I think it says here. It says screened, washed, and dried. That's the sand that I recommend using. When you use builder's sand, it's kind of raw, and there's a lot of like sediment and mud and stuff in there that it may offset your soil mixture. I don't recommend it, though you could probably use it and be fine. So what I recommend is just using the play sand because, like I said, screened, washed, and dried. It's rinsed out, and you're good to go. All right, so you can get this at Lowe's or Home Depot. It's a standard building sand, and you can pick it up. I got 3 bags just to make sure I'm covered. That's it. That's all you really need to know about sand, other than, like I told you, sand keeps the soil from becoming compacted. You need to add a good quality sand. Don't add like you go to go into your river and pick the sand out of there, because those rocks are too big. And this is a consistent sand size. The particle size is very consistent. So keep that in mind, that we want that consistency throughout the pot, so you're not getting random rocks that you don't really need in your soil. It's not going to hurt nothing, but this is what you want to use. Okay, so the next thing we want to go over is the worm castings. You want about a 30-pound bag for 16 cubic feet of soil. We want to add about 30 pounds to that entire pile of soil that we're adding. It's not very much. If you have the money and you can afford to buy 2 bags and add it to it, it's not going to hurt nothing. So you can add another bag or get 2 bags and add it to it if you want. But really, to be honest with you, all you really need for your soil mix that we're making here is 1 bag. That'll do you just fine. You don't need to go out of your way to buy extra, worm castings. Worm castings contain a highly active biological mixture of bacteria, enzymes, remnants of plant matter, and animal manure. The castings are rich in water-soluble plant nutrients and contain more than 50% more humus than what is normally found in topsoil. Now, humus is a very important aspect to making this soil. We'll discuss that down the road when we get to humus. Worm castings are very, very, very high in humus. They're one of the main reasons why I even add worm castings to it. So that humus is a very important aspect to it. Everybody who makes a super soil always uses worm castings. There's a whole list of other things here. Humus and worms. You can read all that down the road. I'm not going to read every single detail here. Again, on my website, you can check it out there and read it for yourself. All the benefits to worm castings. And so let's take a look at the product. Now, there are all kinds of other products out there. Feel free to go buy whatever product you want. This was the one I was able to find the best price on, and I did include links, I believe. So this is the one that I use, Worm Castings Organic Fertilizer. It is OMRI listed, and this is the numbers on it, 100, which is actually kind of low for worm castings. Normally I think it's like 220 or something, but this one's 1, and so it's kind of low. But again, we're not worried about the fertilizer, the NPK. We're not worried about the NPK in this, because we're not buying it for the NPK. We are buying it for the humus, for the sake of the humus, and the other benefits that worm castings provide for our garden. So, but yep, there's Mr. Willy Wigglers. So, yeah, I'll just show you the back of this over here. Total nitrogen 1%, water-soluble nitrogen 0.1%. Calcium, iron is very low, but it does have a little iron in it. Derived from earthworm castings. Here's the address. It says perennials. It tells you how to add it. Mr. Wiggles. Soil builder. Steam bone meal. You want to make sure when you use steam bone meal, you want to get the fish meal. I don't like the other bone meals as much. This is the one you want to get. Though you can use the other bone meals, are fine. I just prefer this one. You want to use about 5 pounds for 16 cubic feet. So you want a 5-pound box of this stuff right here. This is what you want right there. Can you see that? That's the stuff I'm using in this mix. And it's 316.0. That's your NPK on it. This is good stuff. I've been using this stuff for a while now. So about bone meal. Bone meal is a slow-release form of phosphorus, which is very, very important, that may be expressed as phosphate or phosphorus. The calcium infusion from bone meal helps plants develop strong and healthy cells and seeds. All right, that's what we got right there. Bone meal. Don't eat this stuff, guys. I don't recommend eating this. This is for gardens. Though you probably could eat it, but don't eat it. It's inorganic for us. We can't break that stuff down. Okay, so the next thing we want to go over is the back guano. And I recommend you get the Bloom formula. This is Bloom Crazy or Bloom formula. That's the kind that I'm going to be using for here. This is a very high quality back guano, and it was a little bit pricey, but it met the demands for me as far as what I was actually looking for in my mix. This is a major soil builder. For this mix, we're going to want to add 5 pounds, 16 cubic feet of soil. You basically want this whole thing basically used for that whole mixture of bag soil we got there. So this will eventually be added to that whole mix. Back guano typically contains 10% nitrogen, 3% phosphorus, and 1% potassium. Nitrogen promotes rapid green growth and blah, 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 blah. So you can read all about what back guano is good for. Again, we're using this as a slow nitrogen and NPK builder in the soil for upfront use right away, and it's going to give us that basically within a week or two. This will become readily available for the plants. You just want to make sure you add dosage that I'm recommending to you in here, all right? Again, this booklet will be online, and you'll be able to get all the exact mixtures here, so you don't have to worry about making a mistake. All right, and that's our back guano. I've also included links to other back guanos I'm recommending for this mix. Bloom Crazy is probably the #1 recommended one. I don't think I bought that one. Yeah, that is the one I bought. Yeah, that's the highly first recommended one. You want that Bloom formula. Okay, here's the blood meal. That's our blood meal. That's what I ordered, and I got a hell of a lot of blood meal. Now, blood meal, be very careful with, because blood meal is a very powerful nitrogen source. Just be careful with it, because that higher levels of nitrogen start kicking in later on down the road. So in other words, this nitrogen is not going to be for upfront use. We're getting a lot of our nitrogen up front from all the other stuff we're adding to the soil. So you're going to get a lot of that readily available nitrogen up front. This is being added to the soil for mid-season and late season during the blooming time of the year. And so we're going to get a lot of this nitrogen kicking in towards the end of the year when the plant's really going to be needing it. That's when this stuff is going to kick in. So don't add too much of this, because you can burn your soil down the road. Too much of this will over-nitrify the soil. So you have to add the mixture that I'm recommending to you over here. It says blood meal is a slaughterhouse byproduct as dried animal blood, typically cows. Blood meal. A lot of people are against blood meal too, because it comes from the cow and it might have GMO in it or something. But don't worry about it. I've been using this stuff for years. It's perfectly fine, and it's perfectly safe. This is a great product. I have bought this in the past, though they did change their packaging, so I'm not that familiar with their packaging, but I have bought their stuff before. It works great. It's great. It's a great product. Yeah, just go online and read this about the blood meal, just showing you the product we're using. And I'm not really reviewing the product, because there's really nothing to review about it, other than if it's, important, what it's going to do. So the next thing we're going to go over is Epsom salt, which is a very important additive to your soil, because this is almost your entire secondary macronutrients that your garden is going to need. So Epsom salt provides magnesium, and it provides sulfur. So you're getting the sulfur and you're getting the magnesium, which is very important. If you're really worried about like organics and stuff like that, I bought this from Lowe's. This is just basic Lowe's Epsom salt. It's just pure magnesium sulfate. I don't believe there's anything else in it. You want to make sure when you buy these Epsom salts, they put like a fragrant or something in it, some kind of a soap and a fragrant. Don't use that for your garden. You got to make sure when you buy the Epsom salt from the store, Walmart, wherever you're going to go to get it, you got to make sure it says plant food. You got to make sure it says good for plants, because they didn't add nothing to it. It's just pure magnesium sulfate. All right, and magnesium sulfate is a wonder product. We're adding it to the soil, and we're also going to be adding this to our water can and giving it a bi-weekly watering with Epsom salt, which doesn't build up in your soil. It just kind of gets used up by the plants very quickly, and it also washes out of the bottom of the plant when you give it a little extra water during the day. That little bit of water that does drain out, it's going to wash that magnesium sulfate out, but the plants are going to use this right away. So once a week to twice a week is fine. There was one point I was watering this every single day. I've watered my plants with my dosing of Epsom salt every single day, and it never hurt the plants. So you don't have to worry about overdoing your Epsom salt, like if you're going to worry about overwatering it. I'll talk about the watering aspect of it, how I maintain my watering in another video at another time. We'll talk about how I'm watering it and what I add to my watering can when I water my plants to feed my plants, just to boost, give them that little boost. Make sure I got all my magnesium and sulfur topped off, because that's one of the last things you ever want to go deficient in your plant, because that will throw out everything. Your secondary macros are some of the most important nutrients you can have. All right, so that was your Epsom salt. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is garden lime. Sweet lime or dolomite. Garden lime, sweet lime is basically the same thing. That's not the same thing as slick lime, like lime you use in mortar, or like when you're making cement, there's a lime. Don't ever use that in your garden. That is not the same thing. That lime is a chemical process that they use to get that kind of lime for making concrete, so that's not the same thing as this kind of lime. This is garden lime. What garden lime is basically pulverized limestone. And the same thing with dolomitic lime. Dolomitic lime is just a different type of limestone that they pulverize. So that's the main difference. The other thing is you can get this either in a powdered form or a granulated form. The granulated form is basically powderized form, where they kind of wet it down a little and then they break it back up and they sift it through a screen, and you get an even particle size. It's not powderized anymore, it's granulated, but if you take those granules and you squeeze them in your fingers, they break up into powder. So it's basically limestone that's been recongealed and then broken back up into larger particles that break down just the same way. I like the powdered better, is what I prefer, but you can buy the granular if you like. I personally like this better because I really like to mix my soil as well, and I find that the granular stuff is better for a topical solution rather than a solution that's mixed in soil. When you mix it in soil, you want everything is uniformly mixed as possible, the best you can. The more you mix it, the better your soil is going to be. So putting those big pieces in there may not be in your best interest. It's probably best to go with the powder. Limestone is basically rock dust, is what it is. So a lot of people say, no, don't add limestone to your soil, this and that. It's rock dust, guys. It's the same thing. This particular brand I'm using is actually OMRI listed, and you can buy any form of these garden limes that you want, as long as if it says for garden soil. Don't go into the concrete area and buy lime for your garden and add that. You want to go into the garden section and you pick up a bag of lime. Now again, I like this particular brand, Soil Doctors brand. This is a good brand. I've been using this brand for a very long time, since I've moved here, so that's probably 10 years ago. So I've been using this brand and always liked its results. Problem is with garden lime that I find is if you're using it in regular compost soil in your potted gardens or your raised beds, eventually what starts to happen is your soil begins to calcify. As you're using your old soil, there's still dolomitic lime in there and it's still raising your pH. The peat moss doesn't have that lowering pH effect anymore because it's already composted down, turned into black carbon, and you're not going to get that buffering effect anymore. So you got to add something in there that's going to drop your pH. That is what you're looking to do, especially when you're using the old lime. I know it sounds complicated, but once you do it a few times, you can kind of just keep that in mind and just kind of, it comes to you. You know what I mean? You'll be like, oh, I need to add more peat moss to this because I used lime last year. Just keep in mind it does add up after some years' time. And the same thing in your regular garden soil outside in your yard. Yeah, that will actually start to calcify your outdoor gardens as well. So you want to always make sure you're adding plenty of organic matter. Again, I like peat moss because I'm always raising the pH using lime. But the lime is really important because it not only has the calcium, but it also has the magnesium. And it's raising the pH of the soil, but certain vegetables like tomatoes and peppers get blossom end rot, and you have to have that calcium in the soil. It's just because it's raising the pH too much is not good necessarily. That's the only problem with it. Some people literally hate using lime. I like using lime. It makes the tomatoes taste better. I know that for sure. I've grown tomatoes without lime, and I've grown them with lime. And when you grow them with garden lime, your tomatoes taste awesome. When you don't grow them with lime, your tomatoes are bitter. For some reason, it makes your tomatoes taste sweet. I bought a bricks tester. We're going to be bricks testing my tomato taste test this year. But let me turn this over and let me show you the back of it. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the back of the bag. And you can read this if you want. Pause the video and read that. You can read all about it. Alright, and just pause the video as you need. And then you get down to the minerals and the mesh size and everything like that. Okay, this is very important stuff. You may not think it is, but it actually is. Now, this particular bag, for some reason, is not showing me all the micronutrients. It's only showing me the secondary macros. It's not showing me all the micronutrients. I've had bags in the past that showed you all the micronutrients in it. And if you go online, if you want to know what the actual micros are, if you go online, you can look this up and then you can get the whole MSDA data sheet on it, and it shows you all the micros and everything in it. I mean, this is rock dust, guys. This is what this is. It's rock dust. It's just an alkalizing form of rock dust. Now, basalts don't raise pH as much, like azomite and other basalt type rock dust. They don't raise it as much, but yeah, they do raise it a little bit. So don't kid yourself. All those other azomite rock dust, Gaia-like rock dust, all of them raise the pH as well. Remember, they have calcium in it, and calcium is a pH buffer. If it's going to have that effect on the soil, it's going to tend to want to raise the pH. All right, so keep that in mind, that this is basically rock dust. It's good for your soil. You just got to be careful with it when you're using it season after season after season, especially in raised beds and pots with soil that's you're using specifically for that, because it can build up quite a bit, and there's really no way for it to break down anymore unless you dump your soil out for the winter and it sits outdoors, you know, for the whole winter and everything. Then you reuse it. That's different. It kind of resets itself. The water's washing most of that out from the rain and the snow on it and stuff. It kind of resets itself. It's pH wise. So that's different. You have to let it sit out for a year, your soil, after you use this stuff. If you do that, your soil is basically fine. But if you don't, and you like me, I leave my pots in the greenhouse all winter. They stay dry. They dry out in the pots, and then I dump them out in spring. And then if you do that, it's not sitting out long enough. Now you're going to build up heavy deposits in your soil. It's best to let your soil sit out. Then you recharge it and everything. There is a difference between garden lime and dolomitic lime. There is a big difference. Let me just show you the front of this. There is a big difference between the two. And dolomitic lime is generally limestone that contains a lot of magnesium in it. If you add extra magnesium to soil, it's not really going to unbalance it, because we're adding magnesium sulfate, which is magnesium. It's a different form of magnesium, which is instantly soluble, and the plant can use it immediately. Whereas this kind of magnesium is an insoluble form, it's an inorganic form, and it takes time to break down from the microbes and all that stuff. And by the time that breaks down, it's already, you know, it's past. So it's not necessary is what I'm saying to you. This particular one happens to have the magnesium in it. This one tends to be a dolomitic limestone, because they keep mentioning the magnesium a lot, but it doesn't say dolomitic lime. So just because it doesn't say dolomitic limestone doesn't mean that it's not. So it could be, if you read everything in the back, you might read, oh, well, this is, you know, harvested from dolomitic limestone. Well, then it's dolomitic lime. But as of right now, they're calling it garden lime. And if you just call it garden lime, that's actually a different limestone than what this is. I prefer to just use garden lime rather than dolomitic lime, because I don't need the extra magnesium. I just need limestone, which has more micronutrients in it, by the way, too. Then maybe that's why this one doesn't show you the micronutrients, because this is dolomitic lime, but it doesn't say anywhere on here that this is dolomitic lime. It's just giving me all the figures I need for magnesium and calcium. That's it. So keep that in mind. That's very important for you to know. You don't want to overdo your limestone in your pots or your raised beds. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to the next one. Okay, so the next thing we're going to go look at is rock dust. Now, I've been using this particular type of rock dust. There are many different varieties of rock dust available in the market, including getting rock dust from your local quarries. Like if you go to your rock quarries where they cut and grind rock and all that stuff, they have a lot of powders that are left over. You could just simply ask them if you could take some of their rock dust powder, and a lot of times they'll let you have it. They'll let you have, whatever you want. You want to fill up the back of your truck with it, take it. But the rock dust I would recommend that you use from rock quarries, if you're going to get it for free, would be the stuff that they cut those gray stone with, that aggregate, or it's like road gravel. Yeah, if you ever see road gravel, well, they grind those rocks up to get those gravel size, and that leftover powder that's left from grinding them up, they don't want that. They got to discharge it. So they don't mind you taking it. Now, that particular type of rock dust I found has a very significant effect in your garden. It's a very good kind of rock dust. So if you could get your hands on some of that, that's perfectly fine. I actually like that better than Azomite. But anyway, Azomite is the rock dust that I've been using. This one has a lot of calcium, magnesium, has soluble potash, chlorine, and sodium. Now it has chlorine and sodium, which is an interesting micronutrient that it's telling you that it has in there, because one's a tertiary micronutrient and one's a primary micronutrient. This is the stuff I use, and I'll read a little bit off of here. Azomite is a natural product in Utah. This stuff is mined in Utah. Anytime you see Azomite rock dust, it's mined in Utah. Mined from an ancient volcanic eruption into a seabed and is distinct from any other mineral deposit in the world. It adds micronutrients to soil for plant health. Azomite is very slightly radioactive, but nothing to worry about. Should wear face mask. Now, I can't make claims of that. They're saying that this rock dust has radioactive elements to it. Most any rock dust is going to have some form of radioactiveness to it, because it traps in radon, traps in small parts of uranium. You're going to have that in rocks, guys. That's not completely unforeign. So don't look at that like, oh my God, I'm radioactivating my vegetables. No, you're not radioactivating. You're talking the counts per minute on this stuff are so small, so low with rock dust, it's ridiculous. There is a slight effect of radioactivity, but you're not polluting your soil with radioactive particles. They test that. They specifically test to make sure that every batch isn't over a certain CPM, counts per minute. In radioactivity testing, they make sure it doesn't go over that. Because if it goes over that, well, then they have to get rid of that batch. Maybe there's a big hunk of uranium in there. So they do test for it. I looked it up online. Don't let any of that bother you. I personally like the Azomite rock dust. You can use the Gaia Green, and there are several other types of rock dust available in the market. I recommend the Azomite because it seemed to have worked for me for years. It works perfectly fine. You only seem to get a good effect from this for roughly about, I would say, your best effect that you get is something like 2 years, 3 years. And after that, it's kind of just, I'm saying if you never re-add it every year. Like next year when I go to add rock dust to my soil, I don't add the full recommended dosage. I only add half dose it because I'm using half the soil from the year before, so I half dose it. That's usually, and you can get away with that for about 2 to 3 years. After that, you got to start all over again. You can't keep reusing the old soil because the old soil needs to sit fallow for like 2, 3 years, 4 years. Then it resets itself. Now you can use some of that old soil in your new soil mix. But I don't recommend that. Just buy all new soil and start off fresh. When you're putting this kind of money into soil, using old soil into your new soil is not a good idea because it has too many other micros that it didn't use that's left over, and it kind of throws the balance off. So, and macros and stuff, and their pHs are off, and don't use it when you're making this. When you're making this mix, you got to start off everything new. That's where you're going to see the most powerful and best results. You got to do it this way. Don't spend $500-600 on these nutrients and you're reusing old soil. You got to start new. Also, too, we're using 1 cup for every 2 cubic feet, and I didn't mention it before, But on the sweet lime, again, 1 cup per 2 cubic feet. Don't worry, we're going to go over the measurement amounts when I'm actually doing the soil. I'll just point it out, show you what I'm grabbing, show you the material, and then we're going to add it to the soil. That's your rock dust. There's some links in here for other rock dusts that I recommend. Glacial rock dust. And the next thing we're moving to here is humic acid. Okay, so that's what this is. All right, that's humic acid. And it came in this bag this year. Usually when I get my humic acid, from this company anyway, I used to get it in these little stand-up pouches like this. These little, you see the way that's designed? I used to get them like that, but now I guess they're trying to cut costs. Now they're in this kind of a baggie, which you can't reseal. So you're going to have to kind of reseal it yourself, or get another bag that's resealable, a container, and put that in there, because you want to make sure that you keep this stuff dry. You don't want this getting wet. You got humic acid. We're going to be adding a 1/2 teaspoon per 2 cubic feet. Do not use more than that per bag. This stuff is very powerful stuff. If you add too much of it, you can actually burn the roots. So do not add too much humic acid. It's very, very concentrated, strong stuff. Yes, it's a form of humus. It's a natural product that's, I believe, within volcanic rock and stuff. So you don't want to add too much of that, because you will acidify your soil, you'll burn it and everything else. So humic acid's good, but very tiny amounts. And you only use it one time for the season, and that's it. You don't ever add it to the top of the soil for top dressing or any of that. This is just strictly an additive to the soil. So you have humic acid and you have fulvic acid. Now, I'm not that familiar with fulvic acid, so I will be looking more into fulvic acid in the future, but fulvic acid is more of a liquid form of a type of humic acid, but it has different properties. It has different applications to it within your garden soil. So we're not really going to discuss fulvic acid. The idea here is to talk about the humic acid. I'll read that line. I do have a product in here. I'm not sure which one of these it is. I think it's this one. Complete Gardening Fulvic Acid. It's one of these. This one right here, Walter Organic Wonder. I would have bought this product had I seen this. It's humic acid and fulvic acid combined, which is something I would have really been interested in trying, because it has the fulvic acid. But if I'm not mistaken, humic acid does have some fulvic acid in it. It's just part of the nature of the thing. But I do want to experiment a little bit with some of these products. This one has both in it. Had I seen that, I probably would have bought that one. But the links are in here. You can check that out. Humic acid increases nutrient uptake, drought tolerance, and seed germination. Humic acids are a principal component of humic substances, which are a major organic constituents of the soil. Humus, like I just told you, it's in the humus. Peat and coal. So you're getting plenty of humic acid already naturally in your peat and other products that we're adding to the soil. There's already humic acid in there, but the way we're adding this stuff is going to be slower release, because it's got to break these components down a little bit through time, so it'll be more available towards the mid to late season. It is produced by biogardenation of dead organic matter. That's basically it. But this particular product that you're getting that you add to it is taken from volcanic material. I believe that's how, if you read the thing on there, it tells you that. Fulvic acid can be found in a liquid form as a component of mineral colloids. Folic acids are polyelectrolytes and are unique colloids that diffuse easily through membranes, whereas all others colloids do not. So the difference between humic acid and fulvic acid is fulvic acid has a very unique ability to get right through the cell walls of the plant and then right into the plant's lymph system and make itself available, whereas humic acid doesn't have that ability. It has to go through the root system and break down and all that stuff. So that's the main difference between the two. So, but again, we'll be looking more into fulvic acid in the future. Again, I don't know that much about it. Just bringing it to your attention. You might want to look into it yourself. And again, this is the product I'm using. And the amount, like I said, in here is only a 1/2 tablespoon per 2 cubic feet. You don't want to go over that. In fact, I got to just double check my measurements on here to make sure it's the same for this particular variety of humic acid. I'm not sure if this has been a different brand. than years past, but I'll double check that and make sure that that's correct. So the next thing we want to add is our mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza is basically a fungal type of thing you're adding to your soil, which makes your soil become more fungal dominated and all that kind of stuff. So this is a very important nutrient that you want to add to your soil, because once the fungi creates its network within your pots or your soil, once it gets that stronghold in your soil, it has a symbiotic relationship with the plants that's in that soil, and so they feed off each other. The plants use up the nutrients from the fungi, but then the fungi uses some of the sugars that the plant puts out on top of breaking this down and making the nutrients available for the plant. And it's an absolute necessity that you have this stuff in here. The thing you got to keep in mind is, like I talked about earlier with water, you don't want to be using city water, because city water has chlorine in it and all these other things that are designed to kill fungi inside water. So it will kill off your mycorrhiza and your other stuff that you have living in there. And so you definitely don't want to be using city water on a regular basis. Once in a while, if you're in a fix and your plants are wilting because they need water, you grab the hose and you watered it, the one time's not going to do any major damage. But in general, the majority of the time, you want to use as much rainwater as possible when you're watering in your pots. And this is why, because you don't want to kill off this stuff. And this is kind of expensive. I mean, I paid a lot of money for this. This is the first time I'm actually using this type of mycorrhiza, whereas in times past, I usually buy the powders of mycorrhiza. I don't know if I like the results of the powder very much. I don't know if those powders are alive. Are you getting the mycorrhiza in spore form, or are you getting the mycorrhiza like this, which is already mycelium basically? But they basically take that material, and I don't have my glasses to read that. If you want to read that, pause the video and read that on there. Let you try to get you up close. If you want to read that on there, that's fine. You go ahead and pause the video and read that. But this is basically material that's been inoculated with the mycelium, and when you go to add this to your soil, it's going to inoculate it for real. Now, those powders, I've used them in the past. Some of them are highly recommended. I don't know if I like those powders, because I don't really know what that is. I don't know if that's just the spores, straight spores. I don't know if the results of that was any good, to be honest. I'm sure it had some kind of good effect to it, but I think there's more of a shelf life on that than this. This probably has a longer shelf life. But I did a little research into mycorrhiza, and I like the results of this stuff and what I've read about this type of mycorrhiza in this form than the powdered forms. And one of the main reasons that I liked it is that when you do inoculate your soil, when you do add this to your soil mix, what you're supposed to do is, after the soil is done and completely mixed, you're supposed to put it in a 50-gallon trash barrel, put a lid on it, and let it sit for about a month. It takes about a month, and then that soil will inoculate. And what happens is when you open the lid on it, you're going to see the whole top of that soil have a white fuzz on it. That means your soil is 100% inoculated with this mycorrhiza. You're ready to go. That's when you want to mix it back in there. You mix all that white stuff back in, and you plant in it. You need to do that with this type of mycorrhiza, or else you're not going to get the best growing effect from it. Yeah, you can add it to your soil and then put it in your pots and then grow in it directly. And down the road, that stuff will start to fuzz up. But it's always best, from what I read, to pre-inoculate your garden soil before you actually plant in it. If it takes 3 weeks, if it takes a month, how long ever it takes after you mix your soil and you put it in a trash can, however long that takes for that soil to get that white fuzz on it is basically however long it takes. It could take 3 weeks. It could happen in 2 weeks. I don't know. It might happen in a month. It all depends. Whatever it takes to get to that is what you really want. That's the best effect you want when you're using this type of material. Am I going to do that with all my garden soils? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to have the time this year to actually wait a month. I know it's late in the year. Winter is dragging its feet. And it's even right now, it's 40 degrees out. It's really hard for me to get out here and just be motivated to work in my garden and start mixing soils when it's 40 degrees out. My hands are literally freezing right now. So, And that doesn't really help the effect of me inoculating. I need decently warm temperatures, though it doesn't say that in here. You generally want some decently warm temperatures when you're going to apply mycorrhiza in that fashion. That's the correct way to add mycorrhiza to your soil. It's supposed to inoculate, and if you don't give it time to do that, it'll do it down the road, but you're not going to see the upfront results right away. So you could do it either way. It's just, I recommend putting the soil in the 50-gallon trash can with the lid on it for 30 days and then just go from there. And that same thing actually really applies to the other products I'm using, like the bokashi and stuff like that. So that really does apply. You can read all this stuff online. Like I say, you can get this article on HRSeeds.com. You can read all that. I also included some links to other forms of mycorrhiza that I recommend. The stuff that I'm using is Myco Bloom for this mix this year. This is different. This is a new product that I'm trying this year. I am not being sponsored by this company, but I am going to try this because I like the effect and the idea and the concept behind it more than the powders. The powders seem to be like a spore type of thing. I don't know if that's necessarily the better beneficial. This is like instant. You put it in there. I should have peach fuzz in my soil within, I don't know, 2 weeks basically. This is already live inoculated. All you got to do is add it in there and mix it in 2 weeks down the road under decently warm temperatures. If I could get 60 and above, I should have it inoculated in 2 weeks. That's the stuff I'm using for that, so make sure you add that to your regimen. And that stuff wasn't terribly expensive. It was just a little, all mycorrhizas are going to be a little bit on the pricey side. All right, so the next thing we're going to want to talk about is the seaweed kelp. 6 cups per 16 cubic feet. So for the entire mix that we're making, you don't want to add more than 6 cups, 6.5 cups, something like that. Or 3/4 cups per 2 cubic foot bag. All right, you don't want to add more than that because you could burn your soil with this stuff. Here it is right here. This is the seaweed kelp brand that I've been buying. It's just the packaging on this is really, I mean, for the price that you pay for this, you can't beat it. I mean, this is like wholesale price. And they put it in a pretty good thick bag so it doesn't tear and drip and powder leaking all over the place. Though I would prefer if they included a Ziploc, so I may not use all this. I may have a little left over. And I just like to Ziploc it up. It's just less likely to spill all over the place. But this is the stuff I use. I got a good price on it. Links are in the description. It's on the other page, by the way. Links are down here. There's 2 ways to actually use the kelp. You can add it to your watering can. And once the plants are planted, you can water it into your soil. Or you can add it to the soil and don't worry about watering it. It'll take care of itself. You just need to worry about getting water to the soil. You don't need to worry about adding all kinds of other nutrients really down the road. After we make the soil, you pretty much don't need to do anything. I like to add this to the soil. At the same time, I also like to water it a slight bit in my watering can once or twice throughout the season to give that a little boost. If I see my plants are getting a little sluggish or they got like a big growth spurt and then they slow down, I'm going to give it a little bit of this. Not much, very little. You just half a teaspoon per 2 gallons of watering, you know what I mean? You don't need much. You just want to add a little bit of it. So I might add some of that to my watering can. What this basically is this, it has amino acids in it, which is one of the few products on this table that I know actually has these amino acids. It also has micronutrients. It also has other nutrients in it and stuff. But this particular kelp specifically has amino acids in it, and that's something I want to make sure that's added in my soil for my plant, because plants do use amino acids. Kelp also contains gabrielins, and gabrielins is something that is known scientifically for sprouting seeds, especially very old and dormant seeds. The gabrielins are used. I use gabrielic acid to do that. I'll do a video about that in the future. But this contains like natural gabrielins. The gabrielic acid that you're seeing that I'm going to use in that video to sprout seeds, that gabrielic acid is actually a chemical form or a concentrated form. You don't want to use that stuff in your soil. It's a totally different application. But the gabrielins that are in this stuff, that gabrielic acid that's in here, is a natural form. It's not chemically released. It's perfectly good for your plant. You'll see your growth on your plants get really stringy. Like long sections of plant, okay, it just gets really long. That's partly because the gabriellin's inside the kelp. The only downside to kelp that I believe is it's a little bit on the saline side. There's a little bit more salinity in this stuff because it comes from the ocean. It has some salt in it, so you want to make sure you're careful. You don't want to overdo what I say in here, okay? You don't want to go over that. And it's also very rich in, I believe, nitrogen. Well, like it says here, it says seaweed fertilizer increases and accelerates germination. Well, the reason why it does that is it has those gabriellins in there, like I just told you. We use that in seed germinating. A lot of times I've sprouted seeds that were 10 years old, and I use gabrielic acid to do that, and it works. It actually sprouted seeds that would be otherwise completely dead. So this is just definitely something you want in your soil. Regardless, you can read about all the benefits from it online. You can read that for yourself. And let's move on to the next product. Also, there's links here if you want to look at some of this other stuff I recommend. The other thing I recommend in this mix, and this is new for this year. I haven't used insect frass in my last couple mixes. I have used insect frass before, just not in my Supersoil mixes, not at the same time. So this year we're adding insect frass to our soil this year because I want that extra benefit of fighting the insects, because especially up here where I live, the insects are absolutely insatiable. You cannot control these things. By the end of the year, it's so bad. Even if you're spraying it with neem oil and all this stuff, there's no way to combat them. They come by the like a plague almost from God. It's that bad up here. You don't get it so much in the beginning of the year, but by the end of the year, when everything's fruiting and all your fruits are on there, the insects come in like a plague from God. So I have to try to do something to combat that. And one of the things to use to combat the insect problem is to use insect frass. Insect frass adds chitins to the soil, which are natural defense for the plant that uses that to ward off insects. So insects will start eating on your plant. They'll taste that chitin that's in there. They'll leave, or they'll die, or they'll go somewhere else. I included some information here. There's not much on it, but you can go online and read about insect frass and the benefits to it. And there's many different types of insect frass. There's some monoculture type of insect frass, and then there's regular insect frass. This is like a mix of insects. I'm not sure exactly what kind. But there are certain types like cricket insect frass and this type of insect frass. And there's all these different insect frasses you can get. I use this one. This is really the only major one that's available in the market, but there are some other brands out there you can find if you look hard enough. This is the stuff I like to use. It does have a fertilizer aspect to it for a 222. We're not interested in the fertilizer aspect, but it's good to know it's 222. We're more or less using the insect frass to control our insect problems in the soil. All right, so it's very important that you understand that's why we're using that. And it says here, insect frass is a type of vermiculture which has beneficial microorganisms and chitins, or is that chitin? I'm not sure how you pronounce that. A naturally occurring polysaccharide found in many organisms. It helps plants to defend themselves against pests and pathogens, the only immediate plant available source of chitin. Yeah, so this is new for this year. We are adding it. It's not going to hurt anything as far as throwing our balance out. It does have 222 in it, so I do keep that in mind. But again, we're only adding very little of this. We're not adding very much. So it's not really going to throw our balance out very much. Might offset a little bit, but again, if you put your plants in there and they're not little tiny baby starts, but you're putting them in there and they're kind of this big already with some leaves on it, you're going to see a massive whopping of growth because you're going to have a lot of nitrogen available for it right up front. So don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. I looked into it. Okay, so the next product we're going to look at is Bokashi, or Bokashi, I don't know. Bokashi. And this is a new product for this year. I decided to add the Bokashi to my soil because of one main reason. I'm adding mycorrhiza, I'm adding insect frass, I'm adding this, I'm adding that, I'm adding all this great stuff to my soil, except I'm missing something. I'm actually missing adding beneficial bacteria to my soil, which is what this is. Now, this is probiotics for your soil. And a lot of people use it in their worm composters or their compost bins on the inside and everything. because of that beneficial bacteria. You can't add this to soil. It's a soil conditioner. And you could also add this to your kitty litter box. I don't know. I think that would be a waste for the amount of money that you pay for this stuff. I wouldn't be dumping this in a kitty litter box. That's literally throwing your money down the toilet. This is double fermented plus trace minerals. So there are some trace minerals in there. I'm not concerned about the trace minerals. I'm more concerned about the type of bacteria that this is inoculated with. It doesn't say it on here. So I went online and I looked at it, and you can see these are all the probiotics that are in the bokashi. So what is bokashi? Beneficial bacteria on the bran are in a documented or spore state until activated by warmth and moisture. Then each grain of bran becomes a PBM, probiotic beneficial microbe. Basically, what is bokashi? Bokashi is basically like a ground up wheat product is what it is. And then they inoculate it with the probiotics. That's basically what bokashi is. These particular probiotics are very important for your soil, and you want to make sure that these are in there. Because these particular bacteria, especially the list that I showed you, which is a pretty good list, and I had to do a lot of research to find that list. They don't specifically tell you on here. This product just had a high rating and nobody seems to know why. Well, the reason why is it has all these beneficial bacteria in it. And the reason why I'm using this particular product is I've seen all the bacilli that you're adding to your soil, and it has all of them, all the good ones that are in there. And I want to make sure that that's in my soil, because these bacteria get in there and they get systemic in the plant, which is healthy. But it's not going to hurt your plant, but it gets systemic in the plant. And any kind of bacterial infection or virus or any kind of mold diseases or all those diseases you get on your tomato plants, blight, everything, this stuff will actually fight it internally. And that's usually when you notice you start having blight on your plant. That means it's already systemic in the plant. That means the blight has already invaded the cell wall, and it's just a matter of time before the plant fully gets blighted and dies. So this stuff helps fight that off. Is it 100%? Depends on, the effectiveness of the plant and the health of the plant itself. If you get a plant that just didn't sprout right and it's not genetically healthy, it's going to kind of be inferior to the other plants per se. That plant's just going to end up dying off no matter what you do to it. But this will definitely help with your dealing with blight and other diseases that you get on your plant. And this will definitely help control that, which is something I'm trying to deal with up here, because blight is really bad, and it cuts my tomato harvests down very low by the end of the year, and I'm just getting tired of it. If I see a very low or late season blight come in towards the end of the year, even late after harvest, and I don't care anymore, I just want to make sure it's not affecting my plant during tomato and pepper production. So I'm not getting cut short at the end of the year, and I'm getting stuck with small tomatoes because my plant died. So this is very important that I study the effect of this. But I definitely wanted to try this because of that reason. I want to make sure I'm giving it the best bacteria and probiotics for my soil as possible. Also, too, your probiotics in your soil are what help break down the micronutrients and the other nutrients, the secondaries and everything, and make it available to the plant. So this is very, very important you inoculate your soil. Again, if you're adding all these other ingredients, it's probably best for you to inoculate your soil for 30 days when you're using a product like this before you plant in it. If you do it before that, it'll probably inoculate over, but maybe you're using city water to water your plant. Next thing you know, the city water is going to kill off all your probiotics in your soil. Use this stuff and you water with city water, well, that's why you're going to have a problem at the end of the year, and you're going to say, well, this stuff doesn't work. Well, that's why you're watering your plant with city chlorine and fluorosilicic acid and all these other things. Don't do that. You're spending a lot of money here. You want to use rainwater or distilled water or something that doesn't have chlorine in it, and the other things that'll kill off the probiotics. But this is new this year. I am definitely excited to use this stuff, and I might actually do the fermentation process with some of the mixes. I might not be able to do it to all my garden stuff. My seeds are just starting to sprout now, so I might have to let my soil mix it and then let it sit inside these 50-gallon drums. So I might have time to actually do it the correct way, and then I'll film you with an update. I'll show you what it looks like. But yeah, this is a new product. We're going to definitely see how it works. I would recommend you use it as well if you're going to make this mix. And again, you can get all this information here on my website. You can get this whole booklet and download it. Okay, so the next product we're going to look at that we're going to add to the soil is basically, you're not really adding it for nutrients or anything. The only reason why we're adding the sugar to the soil, or molasses, preferably molasses. You can use white sugar, brown sugar, molasses, or there's like organic sugars you can buy. All of those will work. They're fine. I mean, if you really want to add that little bit extra nutrients, use the brown sugar or the molasses. The real purpose to adding this to the soil, and you're not adding very much, we're only adding 3 tablespoons per 2 cubic foot of bag. That's all we're adding. And the purpose of adding this is when we inoculate the soil with the mycobloom and the bokashi, we want to give those bacteria and the fungi something to feed off of really quickly, because they're coming out of a dormant state, basically. And we want to fire up their immune systems. We want to get them active really quickly. They can really get going and shorten the time frame of our inoculation period. We really want to try to bring that month down to 2 weeks, and one way to do it is by adding sugar to the soil. Now, you can add a little more sugar than 3 tablespoons, but be careful with adding too much sugar. I wouldn't really necessarily add any more than this. Too much sugar can lock up nitrogen and other nutrients in the soil. So if you put too much of this in your soil, it locks up the nitrogen. In other words, all of a sudden your plants are starving for nitrogen. Even though there's tons of nitrogen in the soil, the plants can't uptake it because there's something about sugar and soil, and it locks out the nitrogen. Don't add too much. You just want to add enough to fire them up, and you're good to go. That's it. That's all you want to worry about doing. All right, so that's the only reason why we're adding this. Other thing you can add, and you want to go a little bit slower method, but you want to give the bacteria something quicker to digest, you can also add flour. You could also add this. This is flour, ground flour. This is an organic flour. You can also add that to your soil, which doesn't necessarily lock up the nitrogen in your soil. That's the difference between the sugar and this. But this isn't fast acting like sugar is. Sugar is like instantaneous. If you put that in a watering can and you water down your soil after it's all mixed with the sugar, or you can add it into the soil like I'm going to do, and you water it down with that sugar water, you fire everything up insanely. And you can also add the sugar to your watering can down the road, like every once in a while, just to give the mycorrhizas and the probiotics in your soil a good boost. So yeah, you can add that down the road a little bit. But for now, we're just adding this to the soil to help the inoculation process. And we're trying to bring it down from 30 days to 2 weeks. But you can add flour to your soil. So I might add a cupful or two to this total mix into the soil, so there's a slower release. Flour is like sugar. It's basically even more absorbable than sugar. It's just not as fast acting. And what happens is a slower release. So you can add some flour to your soil mix, which is what we'll do here. And the flour will feed the mycorrhizas and the probiotics down the road, and the plants will actually use your sugar too. Plants actually use sugar. And it helps feed them down the road and gives them that little bit of an energy boost. But again, you don't want to add too much of this stuff, because this will clog up your soil in the beginning anyways, and we don't want to do that. We just want to add enough to feed everything and give it a boost. So this is kind of a slower type of acting sugar, whereas the regular white sugar or brown sugar or molasses you're using is fast acting. It comes in right away. Everything starts feeding off it. You really get things started when you use the other one. This is slower. So we can use both, or you don't have to. We'll talk about this at another time, but I may be adding this to the Supersoil. It's not in this form. I didn't actually add it to here, but I may be adding this to the soil anyway, because I don't eat flour anymore, and I have this organic flour that's left over, so I'd like to add it to the soil. I'll probably be adding most of this to the outdoor soil outside. So that's why we're not really going over flour in this presentation. Chelated iron. Now this is something that you don't need very much of. Look how fluid that is in there. It's so powderized. Particle sizes are so small, it's incredible. You don't need much chelated iron. Don't eat this stuff. It's not made for human consumption. You don't want to get higher doses of iron in your body, but chelated iron is extremely absorbable through the skin, the body, through your mouth. So you don't want to get it all over you because you're going to increase your iron uptake more than you probably need to. But this is really good for soil, and the main reason why I add it is I tend to show a lot of times slight iron deficiencies. Now that could be because the pH is out, but I do believe because I'm growing in 100% organic matter, a lot of that organic matter lacks iron to begin with because it's just simply not in the organic matter to begin with. So I do believe that I'm kind of lacking a little bit in the iron area. So I've decided to go ahead and buy myself a little package of the chelated iron. There's enough iron in here for you to mix several hundred cubic yards of soil. You do not need much of this stuff. 1 tablespoon per 2 cubic foot. So you're adding 1 tablespoon per bag of soil roughly, which isn't much. So you could go a little over, a little under. There's no toxic effects that I know of if you would add a little bit too much iron to your soil. There's no, in other words, it's not going to toxify your thing if you add twice that much, for example, 2 tablespoons. It's not really going to, because again, we're mixing that with peat moss and other stuff. And by the time we're done, our 2 cubic feet is going to be a lot larger in size per adding this stuff. So it's going to be a lot more material in there. So you could bump that up a little if you want. It's not going to kill nothing, not going to damage nothing. It's basically a round number where you want to be. It's not going to damage anything. So I left some links in here to where I bought this product and other products I would kind of recommend as far as the iron goes. And that's your chelated iron. So if you're getting effects in your plants and you're starting to see yellowing and you're starting to show some chlorosis in the leaves and stuff like that, you're probably suffering from an iron deficiency. And some people tell you to just throw nails in your garden beds and your pots. Yeah, you can do that in the long term, so to speak. Iron has like 5 different forms that I know of, maybe 6 different forms. There's FeO3, FeO1, Fe, there's Fe positive, Fe1. There's all these different forms of iron. Even in a chelated form, there's all these other different forms that it takes as it breaks down. And your plant can really only absorb 1 or 2 of those forms, and that's what this is. Again, just throwing nails in your garden isn't necessarily going to help your plants. Maybe if you put a whole bunch of scrap iron under a tree, that's different, and they tell you to do that. That's different. Your trees and your plants will get the iron they need, especially apple trees. But that's a different thing. You're talking about a perennial where iron can break down throughout the years and go into the soil, and the trees have a different way of converting it over and using it. We're talking about garden vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, lettuce, things like that. It needs it right away. We have a very short season to get that stuff into our plants, and we need something that's fast acting. This is the stuff you want to use. So we don't add very much of it, but you want to make sure it's in the soil. That's the only micronutrient that I'm basically adding to the soil that is very important. All right, so that's chelated iron and 1 tablespoon for 2 cubic feet of soil. All right, keep that in mind. Next thing we're going to talk about is C90. Now, here's a bag of C90 right here, folks. I had bought this stuff almost 10 years ago, and I still almost have the entire bag left. I mean, look at this thing. Look how old it is. It's literally turning back into one solid crystal, salt crystal. I mean, this has been around literally forever. I've had this thing. You don't need much C90. We are not adding it to the soil. Just want to make sure we're clear on that. We're only adding a pinch per 2 gallons of water twice a week to once a week. Depends on your plant's needs. If your plants are putting out a ton of foliage and they're growing really rapidly and really heavily, you can do it twice a week. If your plants are kind of not growing as much and they're staying kind of short, but they're being productive, but they're not really growing to 5-6 feet tall, you don't need as much. So you go every 2 weeks, you do a watering with just a pinch. You don't need tablespoons or anything. We're talking a pinch, a tiny, tiny little bit. You only need a little bit of sodium, because if you add too much sodium to your soil, sodium builds up in your soil and doesn't necessarily wash out right away. And you can toxify your soil with sodium. So don't overdo the C90. You just want a little bit. It also has trace elements in there. They tell you to foliar feed with this and stuff, but again, you know, we're mixing this in the water. We're not adding it to the soil. I just want to show you the product so you know if you should buy it or not. If you buy it, just do not start adding tablespoons and teaspoons. You're going to regret you did that. You're going to not only kill your plants, but you're going to ruin your soil. That soil is shot after that. You might as well throw that stuff in the garbage. You just add a little bit, tiny little pinch, like I told you, once to twice a week, that kind of a thing. It's not going to have any major effects. Your plants don't need sodium to grow, but the sodium has a beneficial aspect to your soil. Like I told you in the beginning when I first started showing you, go back and look at what I said when we first started talking about micronutrients and nutrients. It's not a prerequisite for the plant to grow, for its health, but it does benefit the plant's health down the road, and sodium definitely does. Has a very slight help. Now, a lot of people will tell you, well, C90 is not sodium, dude. It's micronutrients and stuff. No, it's sodium. It's sea salt is what it is. It's just basically sea salt that has all these measured elements in it. It's nothing more than that. You could add any sea salt to your water. It's basically the same thing. I recommend C90 because it's tested. It's OMRI listed. It's made by Boogie Brew, but it's basically sea salt is what you're adding. All right? That's basically it in a nutshell, guys. But it has the best nutrient blend for it. So, I mean, it doesn't cost much. It's like $5 or $10 or something. You buy this one brick, you'll have it for the rest of your life. Even if you have a farm and you're growing 10 times more area than I am, it's going to last you a long time. You're not using very much of that. So that's the only reason why I showed you C90. I left you some links for it right here. Do not add to soil. Do not add that to your soil. Don't add it. Just water it in the amounts I show you. I'll do a watering in a compost tea video later on during the spring, during the growing season. I'll do a video about that, how I maintain my plants and stuff like that. I'll make a video about that later. But right now, we're just talking about adding it to the water cans, all right? So we're not actually going to add that to anything else, to soil or anything. All right, so there's links here. You can look them up. All right, the next thing we want to go over is the cow manure. A lot of people are highly against cow manure. The black cow is the cow manure I use. I buy it in the bags. But you can also get cow manure from your local, wherever your cows are. Let them allow you to scoop it up, horse manure or cow manure, and scoop that up and then compost that for a year. Come on, guys, that's some of the best stuff there is. Seriously, that is literally the best stuff there is. I mean, we'll take a look at that bag in a minute, but I believe it's OMRI listed. It's generally not from the cows that are in feedstocks. They're generally free-ranging cows, I believe. I could be wrong about that. We'll check that bag out, but that's the bag that I use every year. That's the stuff it's simple to get. We're not adding much to the soil. You're basically adding 2 bags per 16 cubic feet. We're adding 2 bags of that for a total mix, which is not very much. But cow manure is another one of those things where there are probiotics in cow manure, especially when it's composted down. There are these natural bacteria that are good for your plant. Don't worry, you're not going to get botulism or any of those diseases they talk about from using cow manure. No, when it's composted down, any manure is safe. I recommend using composted cow manure in your mixes, especially this mix. It's pretty much required. You could leave it out if you want, but I recommend you add it because it's going to give those extra doses of probiotics that are probably not even in my Vakashi. So you're going to get other probiotics in there. Plus, it's a really good mid to late term source of nitrogen for your soil, as well as other stuff. Macros, the NPK and everything, has all of them. But there's other stuff in there too. Remember, it's eating grass and it's breaking that down. So you're getting all those micronutrients from the grass. Let's take a look at that cow manure. Okay, so this is the cow manure that I'm using. And I don't see an OMRI on it. Maybe, I don't think any cow manure can actually meet an OMRI. But you can see here's the green tag for it. It's been green since 1969. Cow manure 055. It's basically a 555 mixture for beautiful flowers, vegetable gardens and trees. Here's the other stuff you can look at. We'll turn it over. Yeah, I don't see an OMRI listing on here. Mulch and Soil Council, certified by them. I don't know if that means anything to anybody. Let's see. Flowers and vegetables, you can read all of this. It talks about its benefits. New garden beds, existing garden beds, raised garden beds, all the great things. I've been using cow manure for years. You just got to be really careful of the cow manure you use. If you can't get it locally and compost that stuff down for a year, then just buy Black Cow. Black Cow is a very good product. It's not certified organic, but it's still a good product. I've been using it. I'm not worried about getting GMO or the other stuff in there, to be honest with you. I'm not really worried about that. We're adding such a small amount, it's not going to poison the soil per se. So you don't worry about that. Don't let those little things get in your way of getting the best growth in your garden. And some people will argue with me on that and say, no, man, you can't use that stuff, dude. You got to use all organic. Go ahead and buy your organic stuff then, I don't know what to tell you. But here it is. Here's your nitrogen, total nitrogen 0.5, soluble potash 0.5, and chlorine. This is a very important nutrient, micronutrient for your plant. That's it. You can read all of this stuff if you want. I'll move by slowly. This is the bag of the Black Cow. See? It says how much to use. So that is your Black Cow. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about that we're adding to soil, which I feel is very, very important to add to soil. Not many super soil mixes contain this product, but I add it, and it works good for me. I mean, it helps control a lot of things in your soil. It's called diatomaceous earth, and you can get this food grade, 50-pound food grade bag from Amazon for like $40 or $50 delivered. And I always get the food grade. And the food grade, the difference between the regular diatomaceous earth and the food grade is that the food grade is certified so you could resell it as food grade diatomaceous earth. You can't resell diatomaceous earth as food grade product if you're looking to sell it, break down a 50-pound bag into 1-pound bags or whatever and sell it on eBay or something as food grade, unless it is a food grade, and you get a certificate with it when you get it at that food grade. So it's very important you do that. For some reason, they're really strict about that with this. And that's really the only difference. I've read a lot about it. There's really, you pay only like $10 more for the food grade, but if you don't care about that, then don't worry about it. Just buy the regular one. You can save yourself $10 and just get the regular one. But I do sometimes mix this in water and drink it. And the reason why I do that is that this stuff contains a lot of silica in it, but it contains a very absorbable type of silica, which is really good for your skin, hair, and your nails. So once in a while, I do actually consume this in a mix, like a drink, or I'll add it to my drinks. Just a little bit, not much, maybe a teaspoon or so. It is OMRI listed, and this is the product that I use. I have links in here for this particular product, so you can order that online. And Morpheus Silica, this is what it has in there. It does have some other stuff in there. Now this bag, unfortunately, I opened it from the bottom, so I can't turn the bag upside down to read all of this stuff on here. It's basically what diatomaceous earth is. It's fossil shell flour is what it is. There's only a few places in the world where they actually mine this stuff. What it is that there's layers in soil, through all the layers, the stratums that go down, and one of the layers in some of the countries, one of the layers is a very thick layer. It's probably like, I don't know, several hundred feet thick. It's just a big layer of this stuff, and it's filled with this stuff. And basically what this is microorganisms that died millions of years ago. And these microorganisms have a shell on them. They had like some type of shell. And it's like a plankton, but it's not plankton. But they're ancient, and they fossilized, and they formed this layer, this bed of this stuff. And it's very thick layer, and they mine it, and they sell it as this. And this has been used and sold for basically years. They've been using diatomaceous earth. They use it in pool filters. The diatomaceous earth used in pool filters is not the same as this stuff, but it is the same material. The stuff for your pools is unfiltered, unprocessed, and it's basically kind of chunky, raw, and it has its certain different features and effects to it. I don't recommend using that type of diatomaceous earth. I recommend using this type because this is what they call shell flour. And this shell flour is so fine, it's got the particle size basically of smoke, which is a submicron level. It's basically the particle sizes are so small, it's equivalent to smoke, like from a cigarette. So it's very tiny particle size. That's why you can take this stuff and spray it as a duster on your plants, and it'll give it a good protection against insects. Because what this does as far as insect control is it gets inside the shell, and it's like sandpaper on a microscopic level. It gets in between their like wings and their shell parts of their body, and it causes it to break apart. The insect basically dies. That's how this stuff works. Now, I add this to the soil because it's very rich in silica. It's amphimorphous silica, which is the most absorbable type of silica for humans and plants. And plants tend to be somewhat silica deficient because they can't get enough silica from the soil. So they kind of suffer from that. Silica has many, many benefits to it. As far as plant health, you can read about it in here. I mainly add it to the soil for that reason, but there are other added benefits to adding diatomaceous earth to your soil. It also acts as the same way it does when you dust your crops with it. It gets inside insects that burrow into your soil. For example, I believe cucumber beetles. What they do is when they're ready to lay their eggs, they drop down into your soil and they burrow in there, and they kind of make their eggs in there. Well, if you have diatomaceous earth in your soil, when they go to burrow in there, it's going to cause them to die. When the babies hatch and they come out and come up from the earth, they're getting a hit right out the gate from the diatomaceous earth that's in your soil. It's very good for your soil. Again, I'm using it for the silica purposes, but you can also add it as an insect control subsurface as well. And you can spread it around. You can apply it to the surface of the garden like a top dressing, or around your garden bed like on the outside on the grass. You can sprinkle it and dust your grass and everything around it so the insects all die before they get into your garden. There's other ways to apply it. But again, we're just adding this to our super soil for the silica purposes and other benefits to the soil. And that's why we're adding that to the soil, and that is your diatomaceous earth. It's about 1 cup per 2 cubic feet of soil. You can add 2 cups if you want. You can add 3 cups if you want. It doesn't matter. It's not going to poison or offset your soil. It doesn't have any alkali differences. It's not going to change the alkali or pH of the soil, should I say. It's not going to change any of this. It's not going to change the nitrogen levels. It's not going to lock up nitrogen. It's basically an inert material. And it does have calcium in it because it is coming from fossil shells, so there is some calcium. So, like I say, like 1 cup, you want to add 2 cups, you're fine with that. You're not going to be hurting anything. Again, I left links in here where you can look it up. Okay, hardwood mulch. This is the one we've been waiting to get to. And basically, hardwood mulch, we're going to add 4 bags per 16 cubic feet. So we want to add about 4 bags of hardwood mulch to the entire mix. And the bokashi we're adding, it's going to eat that stuff up like it's candy. So, in fact, you may even run short by the end of the year of not having enough solid chunks of organic matter for your bacteria and mycorrhiza to feed on. We want to feed our fungi in our soil, so we want to make sure that we add enough of unbroken down material to our soil so the fungi can create a good mycelium network throughout your pot and your raised bed. And one of the ways to do that is to add composted hardwood bark mulch or hardwood mulch. It's not just bark though, it's everything, and it's been composted. I'm going to show you the quality of the stuff that I use, which is what you want. You don't want to use any other type of mulch. You don't want to use pine bark mulch. You don't want to use any of the dyed mulches. It has to look like the bag that I'm using. If you can't get to that, you're going to have to make your own hardwood mulches, which is basically wood chips that have been composted for about 3 or 4 years. Basically, and you're going to have to make your own if you can't buy it, but you should be able to buy this in Lowe's. This is where I bought mine. You should be able to go there and buy it. Basically, hardwood mulches are the highest source of humus you can get. It's basically known as stick mulch, and it makes a rich black soil, and that rich black soil is a high carbon content that contains high amounts of humus in it. You can leave all the rest of the stuff out of there. Just grow in that hardwood mulch and you'll see fantastic results out of it. I can't necessarily say you're going to have deficiencies or not or any of that stuff. You're going to see some serious plant growth out of there, like you're going to be completely shocked. Definitely get yourself some hardwood mulch, add that to your soil. I talk about it here. You can download this and read about it online. You can read what I have to say about it. If you have any questions about anything that I'm talking about in here, make sure you read it first and then comment below, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. And if I get enough questions about enough things, then I'll just make a video response to your questions. But generally go in there, read this. It's pretty thorough. You really shouldn't have any questions, but if you do, I'll do my best to answer them. Let's take a look at what I got from Lowe's. Okay, so this is the mulch that I got from Lowe's. This is the stuff you want to look for. Hardwood mulch. It's going to be in this white bag, or it's going to be, white bag with blue lettering, or it's going to be in the same thing, white bag with blue lettering with light color. That's an older, maybe last year's bag. But it's basically the same stuff. It's just a different color on it. And this particular batch you see here, the reason why there's so much of it here is they had a end of the year skid sale, and they had other stuff for sale too, soils. I just couldn't take it all, and I don't really have room for all the soils. I should have actually bought them because they were ripped bags and all. It's just a pain in the neck to load it into the truck and get it down here, but this soil you see here is going to be more than sufficient for my needs, and I don't need any more than that right now. But every year they do this, and at the end of the year you're going to see these skid sales. And there was a skid sale, and there was probably, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 bags on there. Some of them were rip bags. Some of them were in these bags they put over rip bags and stuff like that. And so I basically went over there, and I gave him, it said $5 for the whole skid. So I basically got all of what you see here for $5. Normally, this is $4 a bag, and I got the whole skid for $5. What's even better about this is we know that this has been sitting out there for about a year or two. So this broke down even more. I got even more black humus in this bag than what they're originally selling it for. So you can't put this stuff on the shelf and leave it there for 10 years. Because what happens is it's wet right now. This is always wet. What happens is it keeps breaking down. And it breaks down, it breaks down, it breaks down. It's eventually this is going to turn into a solid bag of soil. The best soil in the world, too. This is better than any soil you can buy in the bags. Any Miracle-Gro, any of those soils, the best soil is going to come from hardwood mulch. This is undyed. This is perfect. This is incredible stuff right here. I have used this before and mixed it in soils. Just this and mixed it in soils and grown plants in it, and the results were absolutely phenomenal. So that's why you see me using this, and we're going to be using a lot of it because I got plenty of it to go around. I'll probably be filling my my wicking beds with this stuff this year. I'll mix it with some soil if I have some soil left over. I'll mix it with some, maybe last year's soil or something, and I'll put some small ingredient. But I'm not going to make Supersoil for all those wicking beds because I'm selling my house, and I'm probably not going to be able to take all my wicking beds with me. I'm probably going to leave those behind and leave it with the new owner. Probably. There's no guarantee. But if that's the case, I'm not going to be able to move them. They're going to be too heavy for me and stuff to move. I have to break them down and get rid of them, and I don't know if it's worth it for me. But anyway, this is the mulch I use, and you definitely want to be buying this type of stuff. Now, this is generally what it looks like. Man, everything is soaked. It's been raining here for days. This is generally what it looks like. If you can see right there. You see the quality of this stuff? Look at this. Look at the condition of this stuff. It's perfect. Yeah, you're going to have some big chunks in there. This is the shizzle, as they say. If you want to use a sifter and you want to sift it, go for it. You can sift it if you want. Me, I don't really care. If I see a big chunk in there, I'll pull it out. But in general, you don't really need to sift it because, like I said, the amount of probiotics and bacteria and mycorrhiza and fungi that you're putting in there, you're going to need stuff in there for that to feed off of by the end of the year. So you want to make sure you leave enough of the hard material in there for the fungi to live and create a network in that pot. So it helps and grows and inoculates the plant and everything. So we're going to be adding this to my garden soil. Now, you can add as much as what I'm recommending. I'm not sure. I'm not looking at the paperwork right now. You can add as much as that. Or you could double that if you want. If you really want to double it. But the problem is if you double it, you're going to have to start increasing other doses of your other nutrients that you're adding. You're going to have to increase those by a little bit. I wouldn't say double it in volume, but like instead of like 1 tablespoon of chelated iron, for example, you're going to want to make it 2. Because you're doubling the amount of material you're adding to the mix. It's just going to weaken everything. But it's not going to hurt nothing. It's just you're just going to need to add more minerals and stuff to it. It's just not going to be enough. This mix is designed for specifically what I told you. So that's the only reason why I'm saying if you're going to add more material, you're really going to be overspreading it out, and it's not going to be enough. You're going to actually cause your mix to be short. So don't add too much hardwood mulch to the mix, more than what I'm suggesting, because you're going to throw the whole mix out. If you do decide to add another bag of that, or you got access to broken down mulch and stuff in your garden, and you want to add that, you can do that. Just bump everything up a little bit. You're going to have to bump all your measurements up a little. Don't worry. When you're adding more material, you're not going to toxify the soil by adding too much nutrients. Just certain ones you want to be careful of. For example, like blood meal is very strong, and don't overdo that one. Just be careful with that one, because that is a very powerful nitrogen for the soil. It doesn't kick in right up front. It kicks in down the road. When that kicks in, that could burn your roots. So just be careful with the blood meal. But in general, that's the hardwood mulch I use, and this is the best stuff on earth as far as I'm concerned. You can grow strictly in just this stuff by itself, to be honest with you. You just plant in this stuff, you're golden. There is a lot of stuff in here, for example, that's not totally broken down yet. As long as if you're not washing it off so it turns like white per se. It's not white like white wood, like regular wood chips are white. It's not going to sequester the nitrogen out of your soil per se, because that's what ends up happening when you add wood chips to the surface of soil. It soaks all the nitrogen out of the soil, soaks the nitrogen out of the air. It needs to get into this stage. Wood chips need to get to this stage before you add it to your gardening. Whether a top mulch or you're adding it into the soil, whatever way you're doing it, it needs to be at this stage, because at this stage, the sequestration of nitrogen from the soil is so small, it's not even enough. And by that time, the bacteria are kicking in, mycelin's kicking in, mushrooms will be popping up out of it. Forget it. It's not, don't worry about it. Don't worry about adding this material. This will also, too, by adding this hardwood mulch to your soil, it breaks up the soil because you don't have uniform soil size. Because you have all these different chunks and sizes, it makes the soil stay looser. So it really aids in keeping your soil loose and drainage good. So I like to add particle size to my soil. This Miracle Grow, this is pure soil. If I'm not mistaken, I looked at the soil. I took a handful from a rip bag in the store and I looked at it. There wasn't one chunk of anything. It was literally nothing but black soil. No chunks in it, no particles, none. It was just black, clear, it looked like sifted soil, perfectly sifted, clear soil. So I didn't see any chunks in there. I could be wrong. Maybe there might be a little bit in there or something, but the handful I looked at was perfectly, that was exactly what I was looking for. But I want to be able to add some of this to that to help break that soil, because that soil will clog up in your pots. You've got to have different particle size. If everything is a uniform particle size that you add to your pot, it's going to clog up. It's not going to drain. The plants ain't going to do good. You need to mix that with other organic matter like this. It needs that particle size. Any other soil you go to inside of Lowe's or any of the other soils, you're always going to see bigger chunks in your soil. You're always going to see that. And the main reason for that is that the soil doesn't become impacted and clog up. This breaks it up by different particle size. So that helps, again, tremendously in your pots. Okay, so the next product we want to talk about, which I don't have anything on the table specifically for it, but the next product we want to talk about is humus itself. And humus is a byproduct that you normally get from the forest floor. And when I'm talking about humus here, I'm specifically talking about ancient soil from forests. So let's say, for example, you have a, in your backyard, the back of your property is up against a forest, and that forest has old growth wood in it, and it's been there probably for thousands of years, growing that way. And so you want to go into that forest and get a couple of 5-gallon pails of the soil off that forest floor, because there are ancient or next to ancient types of myceliums and bacterias and things that live in that soil, and insects and stuff that live in that soil for thousands of years. And by adding that to your potting mix, it really brings a lot of life to your soil. So when I talk about humus in this context here, I'm not necessarily referring to humus in the mechanical sense, like the humic acids and the broken down bark mulches that makes humus. Yes, it has that in there. But the humus in this sense, I'm really referring to ancient forest floor types of humus is really what I'm referring to. And if you got access to that, and you can get a couple of buckets and you can scoop up a couple of shovelfuls and fill up a couple of 5-gallon pails to that. 2 5-gallon pails is all you really need. You can add that to this total mix. It ain't going to offset it that much. Just bump all the ingredients up a little bit. Make them, instead of flat tea tablespoons, make a heaping tablespoon. That kind of a thing. Just bump it up a little bit. If you got access to that forest floor humus, add it. Definitely add it. But I do recommend you sift this before you add everything, because there's going to be a lot of particles and maybe things that you don't want in there. So sift it down to a screen, get it to the nice fine particle size, then add that to your mix. You'll see results come out of there that you never even knew were possible. That is one of the best things you can add to your soil. I have done that once or twice in the past and grown in ancient forest topsoils. You might refer to it like a topsoil, because really that's all you're doing is scraping off the first 2 or 3 inches off the forest floor bed. You're going to move the leaves and everything aside. You're going to see that rich black soil. You just want to take your shovel and scoop off the first couple of top inches and put that in a 5-gallon pail. And that's all you want, is that that top layer has been sitting there for thousands of years. The very bottom layer between the stratus, the dirt stratus, and that top humus layer, that very bottom layer is probably thousands of years old. There is a concentration of micronutrients in there that you can't get in any other resource. So the only way to actually get that resource is to physically go out and get ancient forest floor material. No, you shouldn't pillage the ancient forest floor and sell it as that, but in some cases you have woods in the back of your house, you have access to it, you can scrape some of it up. Maybe one day I'll do a video about it, and I'll show you how you can actually get it and what to look for, what I look for in it. All right, how to harvest some of that stuff for your garden needs. All right, so you're not really doing a bad thing. You just want to make sure you repair the land is back to normal as much as possible, and I'll show you how you do that. There is one product in here that I like, that I wish I seen before I actually made this video and before I ordered all of my products. I wish I seen this. I probably would have ordered it, because it's just easier to order and make it available in the video so you can get access to it. But there's this product right up here. I don't know if you can read that. I can't read it because I don't have my glasses. General Organic Ancient Forest O3 Humus Soil Amendment. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I couldn't believe there was actually a product available on Amazon that actually knows about this. I couldn't believe it. When I see this, I was like, I got to add that in there. I didn't buy it because it's too late for me. I've been working on this video for the last 2 months, trying to get products together, getting pots ready, shopping for materials. It's still snowed out yesterday. I mean, it's still kind of, even though it's April, it's still kind of winter here. It's still a little early for me. So, but I'm just saying, I've been working on this video now for a couple of months, trying to get everything together. And I didn't see this product in the beginning when I was looking for it. And then when I finally looking for links for you guys to show you where you can order products and stuff like that, I seen this product, so I had to make that number one. If I had known about it while I was getting all the links, I would have ordered it when I ordered my other stuff. But unfortunately, I didn't order it. So yeah, if you want to pick that stuff up, there you go. There's your ancient forest floor humus that you can get. And I'm not talking about just walking into the woods locally around you and say, oh, there's some black soil here, dig it up. No, those are all young growth forests. I'm talking about going deep into the wilderness of a forest, like an old pine forest and you look at that soil can be 6 to 10 inches deep. That black layer can be 6 to 10 inches deep, and it's spongy under your feet. It's almost like peat moss. That's the stuff that I'm referring to. That's the stuff that you want to get. I have to do a video on that specifically when I get time. If I get time and I can find a place somewhat locally around where I live where I can get deeper into the forest and I can show you this material, I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so yeah, if you could get your hands on that humus, go for it. If not, you can order it here, or you can try to make your own humus with wood chips, but it's not the same thing as what I'm talking about here. This is a totally different type of application of humus that I'm referring to. All right, so keep that in mind. That's why I put it in here. Okay, so the next product we want to talk about is cocoa coir, or cocoa pith is what they call it. Okay, so you have cocoa fiber, you have cocoa pith, and you have cocoa coir. Cocoa pith is generally the, I could be wrong about this, but if I remember correctly, cocoa pith is basically the stuff that looks like coffee grounds. Cocoa fiber is generally just the fiber of the cocoa. You can actually buy just cocoa fiber. You can buy just cocoa pith, which comes in much smaller blocks, by the way. Or you can buy what's known as cocoa coir. Now, this says cocoa pith blocks, but I can certainly assure you this isn't pure cocoa pith. This is cocoa coir. I don't know why they're calling it that. What cocoa coir is a combination of the pith and the fiber. And the fiber is really, it looks like hair in there, and it's really stringy. That's fine to use. That's okay. That's good to use. That's mixed with it. Some of these brands you got to be careful of because it's like 30% cocoa fiber, and you don't even want that much fiber in there. If the fiber was broken up into little pieces of strands of hair that were that long, then you don't mind. But this is like balls of it. It gets from the machine processing. It forms like this hair ball, basically. So if you see that, you're going to want to either take that out and cut it up with a scissor or just remove it completely. But it's not bad for your soil. It's a pain in the neck. I don't like it like that. I generally use this for adding to the soil just to help build soil as a soil builder. I use this for my wicking cups and my wicking beds. Just simply use this for that mainly. I also add this to soil, not only to build soil, but it also allows soil to retain moisture. Now, one thing about cocoa coir to keep in mind is I read a lot of people say that they tested their cocoa coir and they found that cocoa coir tends to be a little bit on the saline side. There's some salts associated with this stuff. Now, I don't know if that's because coconuts grow near the ocean and they soak up the salt water. I don't know. But they tend to have some salinity in it, or salinity is involved maybe in the processing. They float the coconuts in salt water or something before they process them. I don't know. But I noticed some salinity issues associated with it, and so you want to keep that in mind when you're using cocoa coir. There's no nutrients in this anyway. This doesn't provide nutrients. What it will do is as it breaks down into the black material, it'll give it carbon and nitrogen and stuff like that. You give basically your NPKs after it starts breaking down. But in the beginning, it's not. It just acts as a medium that actually retains water in your soil. So that's really the only other purpose I would use this for the soil, other than soil building is what we're doing. We're making a super soil not just so we get super growing plants, but we're making a super soil because we're building soil. And building soil is something that'll last you 2 to 3 years. This is the brand I use, Kempf. I do have another one in the greenhouse. I don't recommend using that brand because it didn't want to swell. Some of these brands don't swell. This one's a pretty good brand. I've been using this for quite a while. If you really want to go high tech, you definitely want to go with Cocoa Tech. They're one of the best cocoa coir brands out there. It's organic, it's pre-rinsed, it's everything you want. But you're going to pay double the price of what I'm paying for this. Yeah, make sure you add your cocoa coir to your mix. It's definitely something that's going to be important to make sure that you get some of this in there. There's also other benefits to it. Again, you can read on here about it. I'm not going to waste any more your time on this. But this is one of the other products we're adding. And it's going to add that moisture. It's going to give you stability in the soil. It's going to give that soil a nice loomy texture to it. And it's just great for soil altogether. All right, so that's cocoa coir. Crushed stone, as you see I have here. I'm just going to be using the crushed stone for a top mulch. Instead of using wood or wood chips or anything as a top mulch, some people like to use hay. This year I'm using stone. I've seen some results in my greenhouse from seeds that land in my stone on the bottom of my greenhouse, the floor. Some seeds land in there, and the growth that I'm getting out of the seeds that are growing out of the stone is absolutely unbelievable. I cannot believe the way they're growing in the soil in my greenhouse because of the rocks that are down there. It's incredible. I'm getting phenomenal results with just growing in rocks. So sort of as an experiment and sort of as a mulch for practical reasons, I'm going to add it to the top 1 inch of my pot, maybe 1.5 inches of my pot. I'm going to add that stone to it. You know, you also want that for tomatoes, especially to keep that blight off of your tomatoes. So that will be really good for my tomato plants, just to make sure that, you know, we keep all the organic matter away from the tomato plants. So maybe that'll help. But again, you want to definitely top dress your pots with some kind of top mulch to reduce evaporation. You know, that's very important. We don't want to water our plants so the water's pouring out of the bottom of the plants, washing all these nutrients we're putting in there. So you want to water it just enough, so just a little water might come out of the bottom of the pot, but it's not pouring off onto the floor because you're overwatering it. You want to add just enough water to the pot so it stays moist. And by adding a good layer of top mulch reduces that moisture evaporation quite a bit. Any of the moisture that's in that pot to begin with is going to be done through the plant, through transpiration and respiration. So it's very important to add some kind of top mulch. In my case this year, I'm using crushed stone. We'll see what the results are. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. If it doesn't do nothing, yeah, well, you make the decision. Generally, here's some more charts for you to read, some stuff about nutrition and nutrients in soil. You can check those out. Wood ashes, this is what I add at the end of the year. I'll burn a bunch of trees in a big pile, get a whole half a wheelbarrow or a wheelbarrow full of wood ashes at the end of the year, and then take those wood ashes to my old compost pile, my old soil pile. I'll make a big 5-foot high pile of soil, and I'll make like a big hole in the middle of it, and I dump all my wood ashes right in the middle of that. And just like that, I leave, maybe pull a little soil over the top of it, but generally just leave it like that. Don't worry about mixing it in there. Let it sit through the winter like that, and then when spring comes, you can mix the whole thing up and you're good to go. So we want to add our wood ashes to our old soil at the end of the year. That's why I put that in there. It's a maintenance thing. You could also buy wood ashes online. If you don't want to burn your own ashes to get it, you can actually buy wood ashes. I included some links for that. Other products we recommend for your gardening needs, you want to make sure you get some kind of soil pH tester. This thing is those probes you stick in your soil, and it tells you what your light, moisture, and pH is. 3 in 1. They're not that accurate. Do not live or die by it. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, guys. So don't look at it and say, oh my God, my pH is out. I need to start dumping lime in there and get my pH. Don't do that. This is just something for you to visually look at and see if it works. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. You might get a good one, you might get one that's a bad one. And there's a lot of reviews on these. You have to do a lot of reading and read all the reviews and stuff yourself. But generally, these are okay to use for general information about what's the condition of your plant, especially with moisture and the light. It tells you how much light and moisture you're getting. You can keep track of that in a little booklet or diary that you're going to keep for that particular plant or your whole greenhouse or whatever. So I definitely recommend these. Just don't live or die by them, okay? Don't live or die by these. They're just there to give you a visual, okay? Then there's the soil test kit like I just showed you. Wrap a set right here. Okay, that's what I use. I don't use it very often, but sometimes I do, especially when I make these soils. I recommend getting a soil test kit. If you don't want to go through the trouble of buying a test kit and doing it yourself because you're not sure if you're going to do it right, you can go and contact your local extension. They'll test your soil for you for a small nominal fee. You can do it that way. I don't think it's very necessary to go to that extent unless you're doing a very large area of your property which you're going to farm on. And so you plowed it and you're going to take a general soil reading, then you're going to want to have a soil test done because you really want to make sure you're adding the right kinds of stuff to a large area of your farm. So you don't want to mess that up. Another thing I recommend is neem oil. And I've had this bottle of neem oil for literally ever. I don't use it that much. It's considered an organic leaf polish. There's some things on here you can read the information about it, but neem oil also has many benefits to your plants as well as some disadvantages to it. And one of the disadvantages is that it cuts back on the chlorophyll production. But I've read here, you have to go online and read what I have here, and you can read about it. I've read that this actually increases photosynthesis in the plant. It increases the ability for the plant to take in light and utilize it. So I have read that neem oil has that ability. Now, I couldn't find the article, or I would have included it in here, but some of these say don't add too much neem oil because it can retard the plant's ability to utilize sunlight. I don't know. You're going to have to do your own research. If you come up with anything other than what I'm saying, please comment below. Let me know what your input is on neem oil and, you know, what your experience is on it. And this, all I know is that this is good stuff no matter. We're not adding it to the soil. We're just using this during our growing process throughout the year. I'm just adding this in as a bonus. 1 gallon nursery pots, that's the size of the pot that I recommend in general. You can get larger pots, but generally 1 to 1.5 gallon nursery pots are more than fine. You can get those free at Lowe's or Home Depot. And you have to bury them a little bit in the soil, the very bottom part in the soil, so the roots could come out and grow along into the dirt below it. And I did a video about pots. If you go back and look at my video I did about pots and stuff like that, maybe I'll include the link in my description or in the end screens. But in general, I like 1 gallon to 1.5 gallon pot sizes, and you can grow so many more plants in that and keep them closer together. And you'll do fine if you do what I say in that video about my pots and how I select pots. If you follow that video, you'll do perfectly fine. Compost tumbler and compost bin, those are very good things to have. If you can produce your own compost, I would definitely, absolutely, 100% positively say you should be producing your own compost. Yes, it is a lot of work, but no matter what way you slice it and dice it, compost happens. So even if you just made a pile in the back of your yard and you just piled everything up, eventually what's going to happen is that pile will break down. It might take 2 years, might take 3 years, might take 5 years, doesn't matter. But sooner or later, that pile will absolutely break down, and guess what? You are going to have a real nice pile of black, rich compost like you wouldn't believe. So no matter what, you should always be doing some form of compost. I do long-term composting, but I don't do the immediate compost with a compost tumbler. So there's definitely something to look into as far as compost tumblers. Look into that. Compost tea is another thing that I recommend if you can get into doing it and get yourself to be religious about it, meaning getting the bubblers and bubbling your own compost tea and buying Boogie Brew tea and making that and then water. You're going to see benefits, but you can also make your own compost tea with freshly cut grass. And I'll do a video about that in the future, how I make compost tea with freshly cut grass, and we can water our soils up with that. It's very rich and very powerful, so be real careful with that. We'll do a video on that in the future, but compost tea is definitely recommended. It will not hurt anything. It works best in outdoor gardens more than pots, because in pots, we got a confined area that all has all its nutrients, but it's still a light watering of compost tea, even in pots, is not a big deal. That's actually good for you. A worm composter. I have a worm composter. I never really got myself dedicated enough to really do the worm composting. In future times, once I sell my house and I'm located in a new area, we will be doing vermiculture, worm composting under a different scale. London Worms makes videos about making worm compost. So in London Worms' case, I will be doing worm composting the way he does it, rather than doing it with that stupid little bucket thing. That's too cumbersome, and it's too much of a pain in the neck for me. I'd rather do it the way he does. He ends up with very large amounts of worm compost. So I will follow London Worms videos when it comes to that. Gabrielic acid. I use gabrielic acid on some seed starts when I'm using very, very old seeds. I have seeds, some seeds now are 10 or 15 years old. They still sprout, but they won't sprout under most normal conditions. I have to use gabrielic acid to sprout those seeds. So yeah, you can get old seeds to sprout. You just need to use influence and a little bit of know-how, and that's how I do it with Gabrielic acid. So that's something you may want to look into in the future. Just be careful with the stuff because it does have some toxic effects to it, but it will absolutely give you results, and your seeds will sprout when you use this stuff. So if you have hard to sprout seeds, you only got a few left, very rare variety, Gabrielic acid, that'll do it. Rainwater collection, make sure you get enough of those 50-gallon blue drums like I get. You can get those off of eBay for 10 bucks a piece. And if you order enough of them, in most cases, they'll do free shipping for you. So you may have to order like 10 of those drums, but they'll ship it free for you unless you got access to those blue drums for free. And the drums that I order on eBay or on Amazon, those drums are generally food grade, food safe drums. So you're good to go. You don't have to worry about somebody that stored gasoline or oil in it. So definitely start getting into rainwater collection. It's very important. If it's illegal in your state like Colorado, well, I say screw them. You're going to collect rainwater anyway. Just put the barrel in the ground. Nobody's has to know about it. You got rainwater stored underground. Nobody's going to see it. If they think they're going to come on your property, I'll talk about that in the future one day. Talk about how you can stop people from coming onto your property telling you that you can't collect rainwater. No, I'm going to teach you how you can collect water when a town tells you that, or a state tells you can't collect rainwater. I'm going to show you how you can do it and how they're not going to be able to go on your property and do anything. I'm going to teach you how to set yourself up perfectly in that sense. Totally different video coming in the future. I am going to Colorado. I might be moving to Colorado. And then when I do that, I'm going to show you how to collect rainwater where they can't do absolutely nothing to you about it. 5-gallon buckets, self-watering gardening systems. I like 5-gallon buckets. It's good for seed storage. If you want to save your seeds, you get the lids, you lock them down. But they're also good for 5-gallon self-watering gardening systems. It's great for that. So get yourself some of those containers and get the lids. I have videos I did about self-watering 5-gallon containers. That's one of the things. And that's basically it. I just included some links here. Here's a link to the video for the wicking beds. Here's a link to the 5-gallon bucket watering system. Those are YouTube videos right there. And then over here, you have all the links to all these products I just mentioned. So you can look them up, see what you like, order them. Grounding your pots. This is controversial. A lot of people think it's esoteric. A lot of people get crazy about it. Oh my God, you're getting out of control. You're getting really crazy, man. Blah, 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 blah. I hear all this stuff. I've been attacked by a lot of people who think they're super gardeners and super pros, but they never even considered about the science behind grounding your pots. Grounding your pots is just basically putting a wire, an earth ground from a pot that's not connected to the earth in any way, and just running a wire to the ground outside. Grounding your pots is very important because there is some science behind electrical currents that naturally occur in soil outside and in your garden. They're called telluric currents. If you don't know what these things are, you really need to educate yourself first. I'm not going to get into this right now, but I'll maybe do a video about it in the future. We'll talk about grounding pots. We'll do some controlled experiments with it. Some pots that are grounded, some that aren't grounded, such and such and such. So it's something we'll look into in the future. But definitely look into this. Read this article. There's plenty of information about it online, as well as what I made available on my website. You can read it there. And that's it. There's just some references here to where I got my information from. And over here we got the cocoa coir, we got that, and just a disclaimer. This is just a disclaimer about everything you're reading in this article. All right? And again, this article is free to download on my website. So go to HRSeeds.com and look for the link, or I'll put the link in the description. Click on it. It'll bring you right to it. Download it. You'll have it forever. All right, so that's it as far as going over the products. I know it was a pretty lengthy process to do that. But our next move now is to actually start adding the material and making the mix, as I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. I'm going to show you bag by bag and how much I'm adding to it. If you follow exactly what I'm saying, you're going to be okay. You're not going to overmix something. You're not going to undermix something. You're not going to make it wrong. Don't worry. You're going to make it exactly the same way I've been making it for years, and I've been getting absolutely phenomenal results. All right, so let's get over to mixing the soil. Okay, so let's start with our foundation, and we're going to start with one bag at a time because I got to mix all this by hand, and I have to mix it in a wheelbarrow. But the foundation is going to consist of 50% topsoil, 40% peat moss, and 10% perlite. So we want to equate that into smaller amounts so I can actually mix it by hand and make it a little bit easier on myself. So what we're going to do is we're going to go by pails. We're going to measure out basically and see how many pails of soil will come from one bag, and so on and so on. So I basically have to divide that peat moss roughly by 4, so I can do 4 bags with it, because I'm using 2 bales of peat moss per 8 bags. So I can only use a maximum of a 1/4 bale of the peat moss, which I'm probably not going to need that much. And then of course the perlite is very subjective. It's really up to you as far as how much perlite you want to actually add to it. But if we break it down, basically what we do is we double all these numbers right here. And instead of 50%, we're going to say 100%. Instead of 40%, we're going to say 80%. And for the perlite, instead of 10%, we're going to say roughly 20%. And we're doing that so we can work within smaller measures. So that's what you want to do. So we're going to go with 1 pail, 1 5-gallon pail of topsoil. We're going to go with about 3/4 of a 5-gallon pail of peat moss. And then we're going to use about a 1/4 pail of perlite. I'm not even going to be using a 1/4 pail of perlite, so I could probably get away with a little bit more peat moss in the mix. All right, so, but that's how we want to basically do that part. And so let's fill our measurements and let's see what we got. Okay, so let's start with the soil. We got to fill up 1 bucket. Okay, so we got 1 bucket filled, but let me show you the soil first, because I promised you I would show you what the soil looks like in here. Now, it does look like there are some beads in this stuff. There are some beads in here, unless these are worm cocoons. But they're spent. If these are beads, or are these worm cat cocoons? They look like beads. They're spent though. Yeah, there's nothing in them. This might be like older soil or something. I don't know. We're going to find out how good it does though this year. But there is some beads in there, so there may have been some fertilizer in here at one time. You see? But that's alright. That's not going to hurt anything. I really didn't have a choice. I couldn't get the organic soil at the price that I wanted to pay for it. I mean, I basically paid $100 for all the soil and peat moss you see, so, which isn't bad for what I got, but I didn't want to spend that much more than what I just said. Now, there is some pieces in here, but for the most part, you can see it's a nice, rich, look at the soil. Look how rich and smooth it is. I mean, there's nothing in it. There's, every now and again you'll come up with a piece like that, but that's all right. We're adding stuff to that anyway. But this is mostly soil. And this is what happens to your hardwood mulch once you add it, and after about the end of the year, it'll basically break down into this stuff. Like you see here. You see how it just flakes up and turns, it's not going to last more than a year or so. Like this is basically, it's almost soil as it is. But this is actually really nice soil. This is probably the nicest soil I have. Better than the organic soils as far as I'm concerned. Because this is all soil and not really too much, you know, pieces like this in there. There's not much of it in there. It's mostly soil. So I just wanted to show you that. So let's add that to the wheelbarrow and let's go to the next thing. Okay, so that's about 2/3 of a pail. It might be a little bit more, but that's basically fine. That's 3/4 of a pail, not 2/3. So it's about 3/4 of a pail, and I should be able to get another 3/4 of a pail out of that before it starts tapping into the next. I might actually be short in the peat moss. I may need another bale or a half a bale of peat moss. So I'm probably going to be short. But I'm going to add 1 more scoop to that, and then we're going to dump the peat moss inside the wheelbarrow. 1 bag of sand's got to be split between 4 bags of soil. That's really what you want to go by. 30% sand, if I was to double that number, forget about it. It would just be way too much sand. So you basically want to get away with a 1/4 bag of sand to 1 bag of garden soil. So that's roughly where you want to be. No more than that, because you need 2 bags of sand to do 8 bags of soil. So roughly go by that measurement. It might actually work out to be that way. Though you don't want to double the sand, because we're just adding the sand to that wheelbarrow mix. So it would still be roughly 15%, and that's roughly about 15% inside this pail. Right here, roughly that much right there. So now for you to try to mix the whole bag and all the measurements at once would be very physically demanding on you, and I don't recommend doing that, because you could pull your back. I've already pulled my back doing this in times past. So just use a shovel, do 1 bag at a time, and then once we get one big pile in the middle of this tarp, then we'll add our ingredients as a whole, and then we'll mix it up as a whole. This is right now, we want to make sure we get the foundations done separately, because those are the hardest to mix, believe it or not, by hand. If you can afford to buy a mixer, like a cement mixer, then go for it. So the idea here is basically to mainly break up the big chunks and just get the sand incorporated and the perlite incorporated into the rest of the mix. So you're going to have to spend a little time doing this. Unfortunately, there's no fast way to get around this, unless, of course, you have a mixer. Alright, so that's mixed. And you can see when you squeeze it, it comes apart nice. Now, it did come apart nice before, but that was because the peat moss wasn't very moistened. So it's still moistening up a little bit. But yeah, you just want to make sure you get all the clumps in here pretty much broken up the best you could, you know. And you see any wood pieces like this, you may want to take those out. Anything like that. That's from the peat moss, by the way. But that looks pretty good. That's not bad. It probably use a little bit more perlite, but that looks pretty good in general. You really don't need much more perlite really than that. You're just kind of wasting it. Some rocks. No big deal if you get a rock or two in there. It's just, I take them out. But that is really nice soil from Miracle Grow. Surprised, actually. Yeah, it did have some of those beads in it. So at one time it must have had fertilizer in it. I'm not sure if that's old soil and they just remixed it and now they're selling it for just garden soil in your garden. I don't know. I would imagine that all the old fertilizer in it is pretty much beet. It's not fresh. Those aren't fresh beads. Those beads are usually green or white. And believe me when I tell you, they're not fresh. Those are old. So I'm hoping that's not old used soil. But I'm thinking what it is they make a big batch of soil and they don't get to sell it all, so it has to get returned. It gets put into a pile, probably sits out there for a year, and then all that nitrogen that was put in there breaks down, and it's gone by now. So now it's just soil. Again, you know, there's really no nitrogen left in it. It's not 100% organic, but it's good enough for me, you know. Now, you could buy any kind of soil you want. Get those things out of there. And that's it. That's what we're looking at right there. Now, that's one mix of just the base. So let's dump that out in the tarp and let's start with the next one. And as you can see, it's not a very big pile for one wheelbarrow, so that should be about double the size by the time I'm done. But that's still a pretty good amount of soil for what we're working with. So you can fill quite a few pots with just what you're gonna see when we get this finally mixed. All right, so let's mix the rest of it, and then we'll start adding the other ingredients. Okay, so the pile is mixed, and I took a small portion of that and put it back in this pail, and we're going to use this pail to incorporate all the other ingredients. It's easier to take some of the material and put it in there and then add the other ingredients to that and just make a mix with it, because incorporating that once it's kind of broken up and mixed is much easier to incorporate into the big pile than to take all those ingredients and just start dumping them into the big pile and trying to mix it in. It's much easier to do it this way. Trust me, I've been doing this a long time. You put it in there, you're going to be mixing a long time. The soil is kind of moist, so now once you throw powders in there like the dolomitic lime or the rock dust, it's going to clump up right away. And it's going to be too difficult for you to mix it that fast so it doesn't clump up or it breaks up evenly. So it just becomes more difficult to work with when you're trying to do that. It's better to remove a small portion of it, put it in a pail, dump all your ingredients into that, mix it up into there really good. It breaks up fine and nothing gets stuck together. It's a concentrate, but then you can take that concentrate and just incorporate it into the pile, and it'll just mix a lot easier. So just add like 1 or 2 shovelfuls back into this, and then add all the rest of your ingredients. Now, I did wet the pile down. I sprayed it down a little bit. Yes, I did use city water to do that, but it's such a small amount of city water. We're talking about, when I was talking about water originally, we're talking about watering your soil every single day for months on end, rather than just once in a while you are going to water your soil with city water. That's not that big of a deal. It's not going to totally kill everything one time, depending on your chlorine level, of course. But just this one time, it's fine, and probably by the end of the day or next couple of hours, that chlorine is going to be completely gone anyway. It's just going to evaporate into the air anyway. Chlorine turns into chloramines once it bonds with the ammonias, and then they just evaporate, and it pretty much just dissolves into nothing. So if you have chlorinated water and you don't have rainwater, if you let the chlorinated water sit out, generally most of the chlorine will come out of it. That's the biggest thing you have to worry about, because that will kill off your beneficial bacterias and your fungi. So just keep that in mind. But I did water this down, and I did wet it down. It's not real wet, but it's wet enough for me to work with it and mix it, mix the soil in and everything. And then once I finally get that into that pail in the back over there, I'm going to maybe wet it down again, but this time I'm going to use regular rainwater or distilled water and just, give it maybe a gallon's worth of water so it permeates through the whole container and the whole thing has moisture in it and stuff. So let's bring this over to the bench and let's start adding our ingredients. Oh yeah, almost forgot to add the cocoa coir. Now you could see how good this cocoa coir is. You see how fast that swelled up? That really swelling up. I'll leave it on for a little bit and you can watch it swell. Maybe I'll do it, speed up the time lapse, but that thing will be basically pushing out of the top of that container. See, that's still hard. That'll swell right up. It's going to need more water too. Believe it or not, I just filled that whole container up. That water's almost completely gone, I bet you. Yep, that's gone. It's still got a ways to go though. Believe me, that's still compressed. I've had this thing swell up so much that it actually made the pail become like egg-shaped, because it pushed out so much on one side. It just kind of was getting ready to break the pail. Okay, so the first thing we're going to add is the worm castings, and we need 3.75 pounds for the one bag that's 2 cubic feet of soil mix that we're working with right now. So that equals approximately 60 ounces of worm castings. So let's turn it on, and that scale should automatically tare right out the gate. Okay, let's add our first batch of soil. our worm castings. All right, let me show you this worm castings really quick. This is what they look like. They're very beautiful, very fine material. Smells good, no stink or anything in it. Just a very nice worked out material. Excellent, great stuff. I don't want to taste it, but I can assure you it's... Okay, so that's roughly 37. I'm going to kind of be exact with these measurements because the reason why is I divided the one bag of worm castings I got by 8. So there's not much in there. Right there. Beautiful. Alright, we'll go to the next one. Okay, so the next thing we're going to add is the bone meal, the fish meal. And we need to add a ½ pound per 2 cubic foot bag. We're going to turn on our scale. And we're going to guesstimate in here what I think a ½ pound is. And I don't think it's quite a full cup, but we'll see what it equals in the end. Oh, this stuff smells horrible too. It's about a full cup, believe it or not. Our ½ pound, I'll just show you me adding it in there. I like doing it this way better than taking it and throwing it into the big pile, because a lot of times when you do that, the wind's blowing and it blows away all your material that you're throwing into the pile. I've had that happen to me. So you're better off doing it this way. It's a little more controlled. But let's move on to the next ingredient. Okay, the next ingredient is going to be bat guano. And we need to add, again, 1/2 pound per 2 cubic foot bag. I'm going to assume this stuff is much more dense than the other stuff. It's not quite a full cup. It's more like a ½ a cup or 3/4 of a cup. It's very dense, this stuff. Okay. Don't overdo it on the ingredients, because you'll use up your bag before you can get the whole mix complete. So, see, like I'm a little over there. I'm going to take that out. I don't want to be any over because this bag was divided exactly. Alright, so that's your bat guano. And we're going to add that to our mix. Alright, so the next thing we need to add is blood meal. We want to add our blood meal. Okay, blood meal is going to be a ½ pound per 2 cubic foot bag. So we want to go in here and just scoop out. I don't know what a ½ pound of this stuff is going to... ½ pound is going to be 3 ounces, right? 3/6. ½ pound will be 4 ounces. ½ pound should have been... Oh, I may have messed up on the bat guano. I got to put a little bit more in the bat guano. Oops. I'm going to add a little bit more to that. My mistake. I said 6 for some reason. It's actually 8. For a ½ pound is actually 8 ounces. I said 6. I don't know why. I got to add a little bit more bat guano. But let's get this. This is what? What did we say? 4 ounces. And then we're going to add, I need to add the little bit that I was short here for the bat guano. You need to add another 2 ounces. There we go. That's the correct amount. It's a good thing you guys told me that. Alright, next thing is Epsom salt. You roughly want to add 1 cup of Epsom salt. Sorry, I have to do this. It got lumpy sometimes, so you got to break it up a little bit. So we're going to add a nice big pile, 1 cup of Epsom salt. Sweet lime, 1 cup of sweet lime per bag. So I got to add a nice heaper. 1 cup of lime. Yeah, it's a little heavy. It's a little more lime. It's not exactly a cup. It's a little over on that. So that's all right. Believe me, I got plenty of organic matter in there. Like I say, you got to use your common sense. I'm going to be adding all that bark mulch in there. That's going to be taking up a little space, and so it's going to really be weakened down a lot by the time I'm done with all my ingredients. Azomite, 1 cup. I'm going to put 1.5 cups of this in there of Azomite. It's alright, you add a little extra rock dust. It's when you add too much of rock dust and powder like that, that's when you get drainage issues. But we're not adding that much, so we're alright. Humic acid. We want to add a ½ tablespoon per 2 cubic foot bag. Nice heaping ½ tablespoon. That's pretty good. It's a little high, it's a little heaping, that's fine. Mycorrhiza. Now I want to show you what this stuff looks like. What it looks like in the bag. It's a weird looking material. Almost looks like, I don't know, sand or mixed with clay particles and kitty litter even. Is that kitty litter? I don't know. I don't know what that stuff is, but that's what it is. Alright, so I changed that measurement from a ½ ounce per 2 cubic foot bag. There's no way that's enough. I changed that to at least 4 ounces. They're recommending 3 tablespoons per 1 gallon pot. I don't know how I came up with a ½ ounce, but nevertheless, that should be enough to do that. I don't really have enough in this bag to do all those bags out there with any more than that 4 ounces per mix. So I barely got enough to do that. If there's anything left over, then I'll throw it into the last mix. I'll make it one big strong mix with this. It's not going to offset the balance of your soil as far as pH or anything like that. It's just to inoculate your soil. So it might take me a little longer to inoculate with this stuff. All right, so we got that. All right, so the next thing is seaweed kelp, which is this stuff right here. Seaweed kelp, we need to add a ½ ounce per 2 cubic feet, which is 8 ounces. Now this stuff is really strong, so you got to really follow this one. You want 8 ounces. All right. Okay, next we want to add the insect frass, 2 pounds per 16-foot bag or 1/4 cup per 1 cubic foot of soil. I don't know why I did that. 1 cubic foot? I don't know. We're just basically, what we're going to do here is we're going to divide 2 pounds by 8. So 1 pound divided by 4 is 1/4 pound. So we need to add 1/4 pound of insect frass. And 1/4 pound would be 4 ounces. Now this stuff is real light, so 1/4 pound is actually quite a bit. I don't want to go over because it's divided evenly according to the bag. And we got to use this whole bag up, so. Alright, so that's what we're adding. Okay, the next one is going to be the bokashi, and I need to add 1 cup per 2 cubic foot bag of soil. That's it right there. It's basically wheat germ. If you look at this stuff, that's basically wheat germ. That's all it is, and it's inoculated with the probiotics. Alright, so that's the bokashi. Now we want to add 3 tablespoons of white sugar. White sugar. Chelated iron, 1 tablespoon per 2 cubic foot bag. So again, like I told you, we're not using a real lot of a lot of these ingredients. This isn't really much. I'm actually going to make it a little on the heavy side too. So it's a little bit, look at that stuff. Eat some of that. Yum. Alright, I think we're getting down to the wire. Composted cow manure, we're going to add that to the mix on the floor, because that's going to take, what I'm going to do with the cow manure is, because I got 2 bags there, I'm just going to make it 1/4 of that bag per mix, and that's just going to be too much to add to this, so I'm not going to add it here. I'll add it to the main pile when I add the cocoa coir. Okay, 1 cup per 2 cubic foot bag of diatomaceous earth, and you can go heavy on this if you want. You can go real heavy on this. Don't worry, this ain't gonna. You could even go like I might change that down to 2 cups or make it up to 2 cups because it's really not. This stuff is very light in your soil. It doesn't do anything. So we're gonna bring that one up. Again, I'm adding all that bark mulch, so I need to compensate a little bit too. So I'm adding extra bark mulch. So our diatomaceous earth is in there. Hardwood mulch is going in. Humus, we're done with that. Cocoa coir, we're going to add down the road. Crushed stone is for the top. And wood ashes, I think that's it, guys. That's it. So let's take a look at it. So that's our mix, and basically what we're going to do is just mix it all up and do it by hand. I don't know what that is, a stick, but we're going to mix it up. I'm not going to do it here, it's too difficult for me. And then we're going to add that to the pile. So let me mix this up, and then I'll see you by the pile. Oh yeah, there's just 2 more things I want to add to this that's not on that list. I'm just adding it because I have it left over. And one of those things is coffee. I have coffee that I don't use anymore. So I'm just going to add 1 cup of coffee. Probably a little less than that. Well, we should only add a half cup because I don't think I'm going to make 8 cups out of here of coffee. There's not really enough left for that. But this is uncooked coffee. This is regular straight coffee. I've read some stuff about that, and it's actually really good for your soil if you were to just add straight coffee to your soil. So I have it. I'm just going to add it. So I'm going to add 1/2 cup. You go ahead and add a little more than that if you want. And the flour, being I have it, I'm going to add 1 cup to the whole rigmarole. And again, this is flour, organic wheat flour. I have it left over, so I'm going to add it. This is more of a slow time release type of sugar that's going to feed the mycorrhiza and the bacteria. So we'll add that to the soil. But you don't have to add this. This is just because I got it left over and I need to do something with it. So we'll add the 1 cup. And then we'll mix it into the soil. Okay, so we're getting ready to add the concentrate that I made to the mixture pile. Just so you know, I went and added the cow manure right there. I added that. I added a half bag of the mulch. I think I'm going to add a whole bag of mulch to my next mix and just bump all the other ingredients up. In my case, for you guys, I mean, you're probably not going to want to use that much of it. So if you buy it, you figure a half bag and just follow the mixture. In my case, I got to use up some of this mulch that I got because I have an awful lot of it. So I'm probably going to mix a whole bag into it. What else did I put in there? I also added the cocoa coir as well. I just roughly added somewhere around 3 shovelfuls, give and take. Here, let me show you what the soil looks like so far. Now, this is straight out of the bag using the wood mulch. You can't even see really any chips, wood chips in there. Every now and again, you're going to come across a piece like this. Just throw it out. But that's it. This is what you're left with in the end. Look at that, how beautiful that is. You come across any big pieces as you're making up your pots, just pull them out. That's all. No big deal. I'm not going to sit here and sift it and everything. I have 8 bags of this to make. This is taking me a while to do, and it's a lot of work. And it's taking up a good portion of my driveway. Yeah, I mean, you can see it doesn't generally want to clump together, though it is clumping a little bit. I probably could put more sand in it. It's just, I don't know if I'm going to have enough sand to spread out. I might add a little bit more sand to this. It feels pretty good, but now that it's fully hydrated, it's still a little clumpy for me. So I'm going to add some more sand to it. And then that's it. We'll add this right now. We're going to add that to it. And this is the concentrate. You can see how white in color and stuff that is. Boy, that's some good stuff, boy. Okay, so that's it. It's completely mixed. That's what it looks like. Now, it can use more mixing. This is just turned over a couple of times, but it can definitely use more mixing. I will do that after it's fully inoculated and I'm loading up the pots. I'll finally go through the final rigmarole inside the barrel and mix it up a little bit more. But that's it right there. We're pretty much done. Now I got 7 more of these to go, and each one of them are going to take a half a day to do. So definitely plan it out if you don't have help helping you mix it. If it's just going to be you mixing it, don't kill yourself. Take a week to do it. Take like a half a day to do each bag and do it. Take your time doing it. Make sure your measurements are right and mix it up. If you go too fast, you're going to burn yourself out and then you're going to get all upset. Also, too, once you mix it, you really need a place to let it store. So unless you have, you know, a number of these containers like this to fill them all up with while you wait, that one mix right there is going to fill probably that plus half of my wheelbarrow. So just what you're looking at right there is going to be more than the containers I have. I can't even mix all of this and have somewhere to put it. That's the problem. Unless I have 8 of those containers, I'm just going to be spinning my wheels. So what I suggest you do is you mix it once a week. You mix a bag and you mix your batch up and then fill your pots. You know, once you let about a week or so go by, go down there, take that mix and go start filling your pots and come back and do another mix. At that point, I really wouldn't even wait to inoculate it because it's just going to take too long. You really need to have a lot of these trash containers in place ready to receive the soil and sit there and wait while it inoculates. That could be a kind of a cumbersome thing when you're dealing with this much soil. So basically, in conclusion, it's a good mix. I am going to adjust some of the measurements online because even though I measured them out and went by the recommended dosages and did what they said, I'd rather use the entire package for the 8 bags. So you're pretty much going to want to divide that bag equally into 8 parts, basically. All those bags you want to divide into 8 parts, except for like the blood meal, the bone meal, the iron, and the humic acid. Those you don't want to do. But some of the other ones, like the mycorrhiza, bokashi, and those things, you want to divide them up evenly and just distribute them that way. That's the best way to do it, because you want to use those up by the end of the year. It's actually a living organism, and you don't want to put it in storage. So use those up for your 8 bags and you'll be good to go. All right, so I will change those dimensions. We'll make those adjustments soon, as soon as I make that booklet available online for you. That's it. That's our Supersoil mix. If you have any questions about any other things that can be added to this that you feel would benefit, feel free to comment below and put your input in there. Like I said, fulvic acid is something I'll be looking into in the future. So we might be adding the fulvic acid to the mix, as far as like it being in a powder form or something. Maybe not the colloids, but the powder form. And we'll look at some other stuff that we'll probably add in the future. We're going to make this pile, what you see now, we're going to make next year's pile even bigger, and I'm going to have to up a lot of those ingredients, because now I'm really adding a lot of other material. I'm going to be adding more bark mulch. I'm going to be adding humus, old ancient forest humus and stuff like that. So my piles are basically going to be double in size. So at that point, all my measurements got to go up. It's just simply not going to be enough of the other ingredients in there. So everything's going to go up in size. Maybe the soil, we can reduce the bags of soil. Instead of 8 bags, we could do 6 bags, because we're adding so much other stuff. I don't know. I'll have to figure something out, but there's a lot of other products out there that I'm definitely going to be thinking about adding next year. That's if I'm still at this residence. If I'm not here and I'm somewhere else, well, we'll figure something out. All right, so hope you enjoyed the video. I'm glad you hung in there. I know it's a long video, but it had to be what it is. I really need to go through the whole details of everything. So, all right, so don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Okay, just some final notes. Just wanted to show you how much I've actually made with that mix. And if I make it a full bag of the wood mulch and a couple other things, if I just beef that up a little bit more, basically what you'll end up with is a solid full, I don't know what that is, 50 gallons. That's a pretty big, this is the biggest garbage can I got. I mean, this thing is pretty big. And it's got a lot of weight in it. So basically you're going to fill up one of those, and if you made this mix basically with a full bag of mulch instead of a half bag of mulch, you'll probably get almost a wheelbarrow full as well. So you're ending up with quite a bit of soil in the end. I'm guesstimating anywhere between 2.5 to 3 cubic yards of soil is what you should end up with, which is a lot of soil. I mean, so just keep in mind some of the measurements are going to change, like with some of the stuff, like with the microbloom, you're going to want to divide the weight by 8 bags. Same thing with the bokashi and the insect frass. You want to make sure you divide that by 8. This you can probably do the same thing with, because you want to pretty much use this whole bag for the whole mix. So you just want to divide that by each equal portion. And what we're going by, each bag of soil, I have 8 bags, so each bag of soil is going to be one of these mixes. And you want to do that with the black cow and the other stuff too. Sand, you want to divide that up. I probably could have added more sand to this. I actually probably should have. It's already too late now. It's not a big deal. But the next one I'm going to do is going to get a lot more sand than this one got. Probably a third of a 5-gallon pail of sand I'm going to add, basically. I should have stayed with the measurement I told you, 30%. Because I was doubling the numbers to come up with a single unit measurement. I should have just doubled the numbers. It would have been perfect. Live and learn, right? I was trying to compromise. So anyway, I didn't add enough. I probably added maybe a quarter of a bucket rather than a full third. That full third would have made a difference. But as you look at the soil here, it's beautiful. There's not too much sand in it. I'll press it down for you. It's not too much sand. It's very loomy. And like I say, every now and again you'll get a piece of material like that. Don't worry about that. That can go into pots. That's fine. You just want to make sure you take out the big stuff like the rocks, things like that. You want to get out the rocks. If there's big pieces of wood, I did pull out a couple of big chunks of wood out of here. Big chunks from the chipper. Also, too, I want to show you the perlite. I want to give you an idea what the perlite looks like. That's basically what the perlite looks like. It's very light. I mean, this is your biggest chunk right here. And if you just want to make these small, I mean, you can just crush this down. This breaks right up. It's very fragile. Perlite doesn't usually last more than a season. You can get 2 seasons out of it, so you don't need to keep adding perlite. So next year when you go to reuse this soil, after you refortify it, you don't need to re-add your perlite. You just need to make a new mix, and basically a 50-50 mix with new soil and last year's soil. All right, here's a big piece of perlite, so you could just break that up if you want. I'm not worried about it, guys. But yeah, that's what you would do. And, you know, of course, I talked about the wood ashes at the end of the year. You want to add your wood ashes to the old soil pile. You want to add that in there. For every new bag of soil you're doing, like this, a mix, I mean, you only need like 1 or 2 new bags of soil and make a mix, basically what you're seeing here. And that's basically it. You're not mixing 8 more bags. That's way too much soil. Between last year's soil and this year's soil, it's a lot. Unless you have other raised beds you're going to fill, well, then that's different. And you can make up another mix and add to it, and now you could really make a lot of material, a lot of soil you can make. So this is going to make me quite a bit of soil, probably way more than I actually estimated. I don't know how I was coming up with 2 cubic, what did I say, 2.5 cubic yards? We're going to end up with close to 4 cubic yards when we're done. I'm going to have enough soil here probably to fill my pots, my wicking beds, possibly even have left over I can even do in the garden. So I don't know. I don't know how far it's going to go, but I'm definitely going to have quite a bit of soil. So anyway, just wanted to give you some final thoughts on it. If you have any questions, just comment below, and I'll do the best I can answer. I'll see you on the next one. Take care, guys.